This story begins in the middle of a battle in the concrete jungle, which in the process became more and more like hell on earth, burying civilians under its ruins. Crossing his blades, Yu Jinho looked into his opponent's eyes, and he asked, "Is this really all that the legendary Kim Hyuntae is capable of?" Without waiting for an answer, Yu Jinho delivered the final blow with a sweeping movement. This is a story about an exiled hero. One day, many plants and animals of the earth turned into monsters, and invaders arrived from other dimensions. The world is now experiencing an era of great chaos, and to fight, humanity created guilds, groups of heroes with unusual abilities. Let's go back to the very beginning. A small group of Kiros is now confronted by a huge Minotaur boss. Tank Hwang Junho held back the monster and cursed loudly because the Minotaur was too strong. But inside he knew that he wouldn't be able to hold back this monster for long. Support Yu Jinho came to the rescue, all in order to distract the monster from their magician. After the spell was successful, Majim Shiyun smiled and said that he definitely couldn't survive something like this. However, she rejoiced too soon, because the monster slowly rose and screamed throughout the area, after which he tried to finish off the sorceress, but Yu Jinho managed to save her. Inside, Yu Jinho was thinking that this Minotaur didn't receive any damage after being hit directly by a spell. However, this allowed them to buy time for the main damage dealer, Li Mia. With a series of lightning-fast blows, the girl brought this monster to its knees. This was still not enough, so the guild leader finally came onto the stage, finishing off the Minotaur with the final blow. Kim Hyuntong, the leader of the Keros Guild, which was nicknamed the Invincible First Rank Group. Yu Jinho is also one of the core members of Kim's team. More precisely, he was one until this moment, when Kim briefly replied that Yu Jinho was now excluded from the team. Left to his own devices, Yu Jinho still couldn't believe that he was just expelled like that. Looking at his bank account, Yu Jinho saw that there was only 10 million won. He thought with a smile that he had worked like a dog for 7 whole years, and this measly money was all he deserved. Thinking about it, he remembered how the tank had said that Yu Jinho had done nothing for the group. The sorceress reminded him every time that a newbie could do the same as Yu Jinho even after a little training. And their main damage dealer directly said that Yu Jinho is weak. And finally Kim, who stated that their team no longer needs such a support. Thinking about all these words, Yu Jinho looked up and wondered why he even stayed in the guild. The story of the hero Yu Jihan has come to an end. However, Yu Jinho wasn't prepared for things to end like this. Gaining confidence, Yu Jinho noticed that the surrounding area had changed. It was his unique skill called Selection. This skill would randomly activate in special situations. After being kicked out of the guild, Yu Jinho spent about a week looking for a new one, and I found a suitable one called the Merry Guild. The selection worked, giving information that the chance of the guild becoming large if Yu Jinho joined was 99%. Yu Jinho has a strange skill. He can see probabilities, and with this skill he is convinced that he will definitely become much more successful than his previous guild. Let's move to the headquarters of the Cheerful Guild. Here sat a woman alone, who was glad that the electricity went out as soon as she poured water into a cup of ramen. After all, this way she could at least have time to have a snack. But her desire to have dinner was interrupted by our hero, who unceremoniously entered inside. The girl looked at him and asked who the hell he was. Yu Jinho looked into her eyes and said that he was here to join the Fun Guild. Immediately after these words, Yu Jinho lost consciousness and fell to the floor. And when he woke up, he noticed that he was now on the sofa. The girl smiled and said that Yu Jinho had been unconscious for several hours. Her name was Kim, and she was the leader of the guild. The girl also said that she looked at what was in his pockets and was surprised to learn that Yu Jinho was from the Karam Guild, after which she thought for a bit and asked why he wanted to join her guild after being in such a huge one. Yu Jinho slowly stood up, saying that he would explain everything. After that, he explained everything, and the girl clapped her hands and said that she now understood the situation Yu Jinho found himself in. However, she noted that with his experience, he could still join any other team, so she still doesn't understand why Yu Jinho wants to join her guild. Yu Jinho wondered if she would believe him if he told her the whole truth. After all, his ability is really quite strange. The girl noticed that he had been silent for too long and took off her headphones and said that if he didn't want to talk about it, they could forget about this moment. After which she looked into his eyes and said that in that case she was going to tell him about herself. The girl showed her ears and said that she was now a human and an elf, in the head. Yu Jinho looked at her in surprise. After the invasion from other dimensions, the world learned about various other races, one of which is the elves. The girl looked at our hero and said that the blood of elves who once massacred people flows in her. After that, she bowed her head and asked what Yu Jinho thought about this. Does he still want to join her guild? Yu Jinho looked down and said that he realized that she was trying to scare him. However, her hands were shaking violently. After this, Yu Jinho, to the girl's surprise, said that he had nothing against elves and had seen several times that they were no different from ordinary people. Yu Jinho smiled and said that he wasn't going to discriminate against them because they belonged to a different race, because usually only complete freaks did that. The girl, after a few seconds of silence, said that she understood, and he added that the divorce was his candidacy and would contact after the comma. Yu Jinho thanked her, and right after that, the girl noticed that it worked, after which a spirit emerged from it, which slowly moved and entered the body of our hero. Boom! A loud explosion and a pillar of light in the middle of the city. Everyone remained alive, and the elf could not believe that her pluron worked after 12 years of waiting. From the blinding light, Yu Jinho slowly walked out. The elf still couldn't believe that the spirit sylph had made a contract with a human. The exiled hero, Yu Jinho, has just obtained a very rare class that only 20 people in the world possess: Elementalist. There are heroes who sign contracts with special beings and use their power. Ultra-rare class, Elementalist. A very rare occurrence in the world, and each of them has the power equal to an entire guild. And now another unique creation has come into the world. Wind Elementalist. From South Korea, Yu Jinho. After calming down a bit, Yu Jinho walked up to the girl and asked, "Did he just make a contract with a spirit?" The elf replied that it was, and Yu Jinho had just made a contract with Sylph, the spirit of the wind. The elf thought for a moment and added that Yu Jinho had just made a deal with her late mother. Yu Jinho immediately began to make excuses and say that he did it by accident, and also insisted that he could return this power if it was possible to somehow break the contract. However, the guild leader said that it was too late for that. After all, if a spirit has chosen a master for itself, then changing its choice is very difficult. And for this, the current owner must die. Yu Jinho looked at the leader of the people and asked what he should do in this case. The girl stood up and asked, "Does Yu Jinho really want to run away right after he passed the test?" Yu Jinho straightened up and looked into her eyes, saying that he did not intend to join any other guild except the Fun Guild. The elf was obviously embarrassed and happy, but quickly pretended that she was a calculating and cold woman, saying that this was a reasonable decision. After that, she extended her hand with a smile and said that she could gradually teach our hero to use the spirit. However, Yu Jinho immediately used his ability and said that he wanted to test it right now, using the Monster Zone. The Monster Zone refers to a specific area where various monsters from Class 5 to Class 1 appear. The closer to the first class, the more powerful the monsters that appear become. And Yu Jinho, along with the guild leader, now headed towards the entrance of this arena. They went to the lowest level city because it was a good place to test their spirit strength. While they were walking, Yu Jinho noticed that the guild leader was a bit too nervous. Yu Jinho stopped and asked what was going on. The girl looked down and said that, to be honest, this was her first Monster Zone after training at the Hero Academy. Yu Jinho looked at her in surprise and asked why she didn't tell him about it earlier. The girl immediately started screaming that she would be ashamed because she was the guild leader. Yu Jinho scratched his head and said that from now on, he would be the leader, after which they confidently entered the Monster Zone, and they saw a destroyed city in front of them. Yu Jinho looked at the elf and asked if she could determine what kind of monster might appear. The girl said that she could and asked him to wait a second, after which she tried to explain that the monsters that are most often found in this zone are cockatrices. She also added that according to the news, about 2 weeks ago there was an accident in which a truck carrying chickens overturned. Yu Jinho took out his blade, saying that they now have good training partners. From now on, it is more of a battle where at any moment blood can be spilled and bad things can break. There are only 2 people in this team, so Yu Jinho now has to be both a damage dealer and a tank. As they moved further and further, "I had all this," the elf screamed that she felt something in the parking lot. The team came closer and saw one of the monsters there, eating an unfortunate man. Yu Jinho and the elf prepared to enter the battle. Yu Jinho looked at his companion and quickly gave her the order to help him from behind. As soon as he screamed, the monster became angry and rushed to attack him. Yu Jinho held him back, and the elf braided immediately used a wind arrow and hit the mark. "Destroy this monster with one skill." Yu Jinho looked at her with a smile and said that they made a great team. The girl smiled, adding that she was actually the best in her class at the Hero Academy. However, while they were talking about this, several more monsters appeared behind them. Yujinho didn't have time to react and found himself surrounded by three cockatrices. In this critical situation, his skill selection was activated. Time slowed down and Yujinho asked the system to find him the best route to evade. The selection, after a few seconds, declared that if Yujinho ducked, the chance of dodging would be 82%. Yujinho immediately carried out this plan and remained unharmed. And then he used the acceleration skill and cut down all his opponents, leaving behind only minced chicken. The elf who was watching all this feeding could believe that Yujinho was already so good at controlling the wind spirit. Looking at his back, she thought that it didn't seem like it at all that Yujinho had only woken up yesterday, since he was learning at an incredible speed. Yujinho put down his blade and said that they needed to collect farm. While he was doing this, he was musing that he doubted that this was enough to verify. During these thoughts, his skill worked. Yujinho immediately looked at the guild head and ordered her to duck. Behind her was a huge boss. Fortunately, Yujinho managed to use the wind power to reach her and leave her in a safe position. They prepared to fight, and the guild leader asked, "Why is this monster in the 5th class monster zone?" Yujinho assessed him and said that most likely they were looking at a deviant. Using selection, Yujinho found that the probability of victory was only 12%. After some discussion, Yujinho asked, "Will she be able to slow down this monster?" The girl replied that she only had enough strength to slow him down for a second at most, and as soon as Yujinho heard these words, he rushed into battle, ordering that this would be enough. The elf used the slow wind and restrained the monster's movements, and Yujinho immediately jumped in front of it. He prepared to deliver the fatal blow. However, a second passed, and the monster was already preparing to devour our hero. In midair, Yujinho remembered the last words he heard from his former guild leader. Kim said that Yujinho was completely useless. Filled with the power of the wind spirit and using his skill, Yujinho was able to strike at the only vulnerable spot. After which, out of fatigue, he fell to the ground. An unknown person was watching this battle. The man adjusted his glasses with a smile and said that it turns out that there is another elementalist in Korea besides him. This man, an earth elementalist, named Yoon Do-ha. Let's move to Gyeonggi province, where the 2nd class monster zone is located. Our hero's former guild was fighting here now. While the tank held back, the sorceress destroyed all the monsters around. After which she laughed and said that she was surprised that her team understood such a fuss about these weaklings. Tank got angry and said that he was almost hit by her spell. The sorceress laughed and said that this is exactly why she told him to lose weight. The man wanted to argue about something else but stopped with trembling hands. After which he gained confidence and shouted that a monster had appeared behind the sorceress. The girl turned around and realized that one of them remained alive. She called out the name of our hero so that he would cover her. However, she did it out of habit. Yujinho had not been on their team for a long time. The girl was already prepared to die. However, the head of the guild appeared, and with one blow cut this monster into 2 parts. After a complete cleanup, the team began to rest. The sorceress said that it was really hard. Tank noticed that the last monster was different from the usual one, and it was probably some kind of variety. However, the girl replied that there was nothing strange between them. The leader approached them and said that it was an ordinary giant worm. I asked why his team was afraid of this monster. The sorceress wanted to answer something, but they were interrupted by Lee Mia, who returned covered in blood and said that the processing of the 2nd zone was complete. The guild leader looked at her, saying that he actually warned her not to behave as I wanted. After all, there is no one else here to take care of her. The girl looked at the chief and said that she knew it very well. Tank slowly stood up and looked down and asked, "Could it be that they ended up in this situation because Yuji-han was no longer on the team?" The head of the guild immediately shouted that this was simply impossible. After all, even if he left, he was just a worthless support, and their team doesn't need someone like that weakling anymore. Meanwhile, Yu Jinho stood amidst the remains of the dead deviant's body, enveloped in Sylph's power. I couldn't believe that Yu Jinho just took down that giant single-handedly. Not far from them, there was another unknown guy who was surprised that these two were able to kill this kind of monsters alone. After that, he smiled and said that this was a real goldmine. When the girl came to her senses, she ran up to our hero and asked if he was hurt. However, just as she started to run, Yu Jinho lost consciousness again and fell to the ground. The girl immediately put him on her lap and began asking if he was okay. Yu Jinho, completely exhausted, smiled and offered to farm. He smiled and said that the monster species were very rare and they would definitely be able to sell them at a high price. The elf couldn't believe that he was talking about money in such a state. After which, she started to hit him and say that she couldn't believe that Yu Jinho was still joking because she thought that something serious had happened. After that, the girl calmed down and looked at what was left of the monster, saying that it was too much. Yu Jinho replied that it would be difficult for two. As soon as Yu Jinho said this, a boy appeared and said that he noticed that they needed help. Yu Jinho and the elf looked at him, and smiling, the guy said that his name was Chang Sime, and he was from the Montan Monster Processing Company. Yu Jinho immediately said that these people specialize in collecting waste from monsters. However, it is very strange what a businessman is doing in such a place. The guy who was the CEO of his company laughed and said that his company was completely new, so he had to do this to earn his living. After that, he looked at all that was left of the monsters and said that it would be a good idea to leave the processing of the basilisk's ears to his shoulders. Yu Jinho looked at this guy and thought that something was clearly wrong here. However, he gave his consent, and then the guy changed his clothes, saying that he was surprised that Yu Jinho cut him up so well because meat of such quality would certainly be expensive. The head of the guild immediately said with a smile that they would finally be able to move to a new office. Meanwhile, the guy was smiling and thinking that he would leave her as much waste as she wanted, and in return, he will take the only thing he still has, the magical crystal that appears only after the death of a species. The guy was already thinking about how he would get rich thanks to this, but as soon as he raised it to 5th place, the surroundings began to change. Yu Jinho immediately took out his blade, and the guy who was collecting the waste was shackled. He also began to beg for mercy and shouted that he would give back their magic crystal. However, it was Nia Yu Jinho who did this, and not the guild leader. The elementalist 5th appeared in front of them and said that businessmen always have bad habits and asked how this guy dared to steal someone else's item. The guild leader couldn't believe that such a strong hero was in such a low-level place. Yu Jinho took the magic crystal and said that this item, damn it, was his guild's, then asked, "Is it possible that the elementalist is going to rob them?" The man smiled and said that by order of his guild, he had to catch this species. Yu Jinho thought that it was incredibly dangerous, but he said with a smile that it wasn't his problem. After that, Yu Jinho activated the selection and the system told him that the probability of victory was 0%. As soon as Yu Jinho read this notice, an earth elementalist appeared behind him, and with great force he slammed our hero's face into the ground, after which the man said with a smile that it was just a warning. This elementalist, the leader of one of the largest guilds in Korea called Dice, and also the only earth elementalist in the whole world, a transcendental hero, people called him a dragon. The elf pointed her staff at the dragon, asking him to move away from the yoga participant. However, the earth dragon only smiled and said that it would be better for her if she remained standing where she was. Let's add that otherwise Yu Jinho will die. The girl lowered her weapon that he was speaking seriously. However, Yu Jinho looked into his opponent's eyes and said that only the earth dragon would die here, after which he used a wind skill called Windy Night, throwing the earth dragon away from himself several meters. The man sized up his opponent, and I realized that at the moment when Yu Jinho fell to the ground, he used the element to reduce the damage. And besides, hiding his element, he managed to counterattack. The earth dragon smiled and thought that this guy was quite interesting. However, Yu Jinho was receiving notifications that if he continued to use elemental magic, the probability of death would be 95% LOL. Yu Jinho looked at his opponent, thinking that he had just spent all his remaining energy on this attack. However, it still did not deal any damage to him. The earth dragon took a couple of steps forward and said that if they had already exchanged greeting blows, then it was probably time to move on to the second round. However, instead of fighting, Yu Jinho simply threw the magic crystal at the earth dragon's face, after which Yu Jinho raised his hands up. It was me who said that he surrendered. The earth dragon couldn't believe that Yu Jinho just stayed behind, and Yu Jinho was saying that his goal was the magic crystal, and considering this, Yu Jinho no longer wanted to continue the fight. Yu Jinho also added that otherwise, by inventing the Earth Dragon, he would violate the Declaration of Surrender, paragraph 9 of Article 38 of the Hero Law. The Earth Dragon got angry and said that he just wanted to have fun. While he was talking about this, helicopters appeared behind him. Members of the Hero Association had arrived. The manager climbed straight out of the helicopter and asked how the Earth Dragon dared to come here alone. The man smiled and showed her the magic crystal, saying that he had just completed his task, so there was no need to scold him immediately upon arrival. The man prepared to board the helicopter and told the braid that they would determine the winner later and also asked the name of his opponent. Yu Jinho introduced himself and said that he was from the Fun Guild. The Earth Dragon thought for a moment and said that if they took part in the test to promote to the fourth class, he would personally recommend them. Yu Jinho looked at him in surprise and asked why he decided to do that. However, the man said with a smile that he just wanted to and there was no special reason. Once inside the helicopter, the man said that the manager should write a letter of recommendation on his behalf, to which the woman said that the test was in 2 days, and they could not send the letter right now because, moreover, their guild was not registered. However, while she was talking about this, she noticed something interesting. The Earth Dragon's left arm was injured. The girl immediately wondered how this was even possible. And the Earth Dragon looked at Leo with a smile and thought that he was incredibly happy. Yu Jinho and the elf, left alone with the guy who deals with waste, said that it was time for him to prepare for a beating and not even think about begging for forgiveness. However, the guy immediately came up with something and said that he overheard their conversation and heard that they were going to take part in a test for promotion to the 4th grade. The guy said that the test would actually take place in 2 days, so they should change their equipment right now. After all, judging by everything, the service life of our hero's blade has already come to an end, and the same applies to other equipment, because if they are tested in this form, then a catastrophe will clearly occur. The guy said that he had to go to a workshop that he knows and sort it out there. And after that, they will sort out all their pores. Yu Jinho agreed, and they went to a workshop nearby. Once inside, Yu Jinho said that he didn't see anyone here. The elf looked at the businessman and asked if this was one of his tricks. The guy immediately stated that of course not. While he was saying this, a blacksmith appeared in front of them and said that, in fact, they had a day off today. Dwarves, a race consisting of first-class blacksmiths. This is the race that any hero would want to meet the most, as the weapons of the dwarves boast the highest level of quality. Yu Jinho and the elf greeted the blacksmith. After that, the girl turned around and said that this guy wasn't so bad, because to think that he brought them to a workshop run by a dwarf. When she looked back, she saw that he had disappeared without a trace. The man meanwhile laughed and said that he was not a gnome but a very ordinary person. Yu Jinho said that this was just nonsense and asked to show his ID. The man got a little angry and handed them his ID. The guys looked at the ID and were convinced that he was 27 years old and that he really was an ordinary person. After that, they took a closer look and asked why he looked completely different in the photograph. The guys have already started saying that this is probably an ID card and that we need to report this to the police. However, after that, they abandoned this idea, and the head of the guild got angry and grabbed her head and shouted that this idiot had tricked them again and sent them to an ordinary person. However, while they were shouting about this, the blacksmith noticed something interesting and asked if he could look at our hero's blade. When the man took it in his hands, he took a closer look and asked, "Is Yu Jinho a wind elementalist?" Yu Jinho was surprised and asked how the blacksmith could know this. The man stated that a first-class blacksmith could guess the owner of a blade from the markings on it. And unfortunately, this blade could not resist the style of the elements. The man went to look at his supplies and said that he had the perfect weapon for a wind elemental. Having found something interesting, at least a place, he approached our hero and handed him a special blade, saying that this blade unites the elements. The blacksmith also added that the sword's name is Nam Ho Yol. The guild leader asked, "Did the blacksmith really name the blade after himself?" At this rate, 2 days flew by. Let's move into the future. The day of the exam for promotion. Yu Jinho and his guild leader went inside the building where the exam was to be held. The elf looked around and said that she was surprised that there were so many people here. Yu Jinho immediately remembered that he had once taken the test for the 4th rank as part of another guild. Some even found out who Yu Jinho was and said that he was the guy who was kicked out of the best guild. Who would have thought that he would show up at this exam? People also said that if they were in his place, they would be too ashamed to continue to pretend to be a hero. Elf Kim leaned over and asked if they were talking about her teammate, but Yu Jinho said that he didn't care that people tended to badmouth others when they were together. Inside, Yu Jinho was thinking that in any case he felt relieved, because there were no rumors about what happened in the Monster Zone. I will explain that it reveals the fact that Yu Jinho is an elementalist. As long as possible, nothing good will come of it if you attract unnecessary attention from envious people. While Yu Jinho was thinking about this, a 4th grade examiner appeared in front of him. He looked at our hero and said that he saw in front of him the most ordinary idiots who could not even compare to the average level. In a word, they were talentless. When Yu Jinho saw who would be conducting the exam, he immediately used the selection. And he saw that because of that bastard with whom they had old scores to settle, the probability of passing was only 1%. Thinking about this, Yu Jinho tried to determine whether the Earth Dragon had really written a letter of recommendation. Meanwhile, the manager approached the Earth Dragon and said in a braided voice that she had just sent a letter of recommendation for the promotion of the fourth class only to the team he was talking about. The girl also opened the resume and asked why he chose Bang Yun-sik as the examiner. Let's move to the location of the fourth grade exam. The first thing to do was to study the examiner and then attack him immediately after the battle began. That's what one team decided. And the examiner said that was a very reckless strategy. Having dealt with them with one blow, the man declared that he saw only idiots in front of him, after which he announced that the 12th team had failed the test. The others discussed how this examiner was going too far, which was causing doubts about whether anyone would pass this exam at all. A few hours later, the remaining examiners said that now there would be the last team, the Guild of Fun. One of the men said that this was the guild that their leader recommended. Everyone who stood above said that these guys will definitely have a hard time. After all, the leader of the Dice Guild team, fourth grade examiner Bang Yun-sik, does not possess any mercy or flexibility at all. When Yu Jinho found himself in front of his examiner, he heard the loudspeaker announce that for the next 5 minutes, Team Fun would have to fight the examiner. The requirements for passing would be met when the heroes either completely defeated the examiner or received confirmation from him that they had passed. The guild leader immediately wondered how these guys thought they were supposed to beat the examiner, considering they were only in the 5th grade. Yu Jinho took a closer look and realized that this guy had probably already fought with many teams, but now there wasn't a single scratch on him. After that, Yu Jinho took hold of his blade and said that the guild leader should help him from behind like when they fought against the basilisk. Yu Jinho slowly took out his blade, saying that this would clearly be a difficult battle. After this, they announced that the exam was beginning, and the examiner immediately rushed into the attack, throwing our hero away. Then the man tried to knock the girl out, but his fist stopped. The man was surprised that Yu Jinho was able to block the blow from such a distance. After that, he looked at the guy and realized that the letter of recommendation was definitely not fake, and Yu Jinho was an interesting guy. Yu Jinho had already stood up in the meantime, and then the examiner threw the girl aside and rushed to attack again. They crossed their blades, and Yu Jinho thought that it was incredibly heavy and hard to believe that a wooden beer could cause so much damage. After an hour of analyzing the situation, Yu Jinho decided that he needed to increase the distance first, after which, Yu Jinho used the Windy Night skill and pushed the examiner away from her. The man immediately realized that Yu Jinho had wind magic, thinking that it was an annoying talent. However, while he was thinking about this, Yu Jinho had already used acceleration and appeared behind him, swinging his blade. A few hours ago, the manager of the Earth Dragon asked why he chose this man as the examiner. Because if the Earth Dragon wrote something like a letter of recommendation, it would work against them considering who would be conducting the exam, because this and their guild were facing hard times. The Earth Dragon laughed and said that it was all because this bastard was one of a kind. Swordsman, cut through the wind! Let's return to the training room, where there is no living place left of our hero. Yu Jinho thought that because of this, he was no longer as fast as before, because he was still feeling the after effects of his previous fights with the Assyrian and Earth Dragon. And also, moreover, for some time now, the blade in his hands began to consume simply an incredible amount of energy. Ban approached our hero and asked if he really received a letter of recommendation from the Earth Dragon, only thanks to this skill. The man said that he would finish their ascension right here and prepared to finish off our hero. However, the head of the guild, Fun, immediately jumped into the air and took aim with her staff. The girl missed, but she was able to buy some time. Inside, she was now thinking that she couldn't hide behind her teammate forever, and had to try to contribute to the victory. The examiner asked if she was really so stupid that she wasn't going to back down. The girl fixed her hair and said that she is not stupid, and is also the head of the Fun Guild. Ban smiled and said that it had been a long time since he had met elves here. Unlike normal wizards, elves can sense the flow of energy. This is to predict where attacks will go. After that, they continued the fight, and the girl attacked him from different sides. The examiner was surprised that the 5th grade used such a complex skill, combining it with simple skills. However, after all this, he was even more surprised because the girl in front of him had just used hexagonal magic. As soon as he thought about it, he immediately discarded those words of the sunset because she used 7-sided magic combining many complex techniques. Looking at the approaching spell projectiles, the examiner thought that he was caught, after which all the spells hit the target. The elf, noticing how powerful the explosion was, thought that he had been hit pretty hard. And even if he was an examiner, he clearly wouldn't be able to stay on his feet. But as soon as she thought about it, she felt a wooden blade near her neck. The examiner stood behind and said that it was not bad to close the distance and drive into a corner was a good move. However, it was too slow. Elf Kim couldn't believe that this guy was able to block the seven-sided magic just now. But suddenly, Yu Jinho stood up, prepared to rush, and said that the examiner would lose because of his arrogance. The sword in his hands can't absorb energy, and Yu Jinho had just spent almost all of his energy. So the only way out was to gather what little energy he could and strike. Meanwhile, one of the owners of the Keros Guild stood in front of the window. The manager came to him and said that he had a report on the status of Kim Hyun-tae's team in his hands. The man asked how the team and Kim Kang-woo were feeling. The manager asked again about the last one, and then the head said that this was the guy he sent to the team after they excluded Yu Jihan. By the way, in front of us is the head of the guild, Park Jun-seob. The manager looked at the reports and said that the examination results showed that he was still in the adaptation stage and seemed a little unstable. The guild leader replied that Kim should stabilize his condition himself because this guy was much more useful than Yu Jinho. The manager became a little tense and said that there was some more information about our hero, after which he announced that it became known that Yu Jinho passed the exam to promote to the 4th grade. And he asked, "Are they really talking about the same person?" Then he asked how a brat who couldn't get a single letter of recommendation passed the test for promotion. After which, the manager said that Yu Jinho received a letter of recommendation from the Earth Dragon. Let's go back a bit to the past. When Yu Jinho used his final strike, he left a huge cut on the floor and held his blade near the examiner's neck. Ban smiled. Inside, he was thinking that he was wondering how Yu Jinho was able to get a letter of recommendation from the Earth Dragon. However, now everything fell into place. The examiner bowed his head and said that he gave up. Inside, he was smiling and thinking that sending an elementalist to the exam was cheating, and otherwise Yu Jinho wouldn't have been able to defeat him. After all this, they went into the corridor, and Kim immediately asked how Yu Jinho learned to use elemental magic so quickly. Yu Jinho said that he somehow managed to do it on his own. And the girl laughed and said that she was surprised that Yu Jinho showed a new technique every time. Yu Jinho looked at his hands and thought that he definitely felt like he had become closer to elemental magic thanks to this battle. And perhaps that is exactly what the Earth Dragon had in mind. Yu Jinho looked at the guild leader and said that she was also great, because they couldn't win only because she distracted him. After that, Yu Jinho looked around and said that they somehow won the exam battle, but they still had the exam interview. Yu Jinho and the head of the people went inside. There he saw several old men who were loudly discussing that most of the teams were trash. Yu Jinho thought about what they were saying so that they wanted those who came in to hear exactly that. However, Yu Jinho didn't pay attention to this, and they sat down opposite the admissions office. One of the men looked at them and then checked the reports and asked if among all the teams that participated this time, were they the only ones who passed the exam battle? Yu Jinho said that was the case, and the man said that it was very surprising. Yu Jinho said with a smile that he thought they were just lucky. And then, one of the admissions officers said that the fact that they beat him together was really amazing, and he didn't think they needed to conduct an interview about it. However, one man looked at the guild leader and asked to see her ears. As soon as the girl fixed her hair and exposed her ears, one of the admissions committee said that he was surprised that there was a half-elf in front of them. After which he licked his lips and said that he hoped that in front of him was a real elf. The rest of the admissions committee looked at the man and asked him to watch his words. The man immediately apologized and said that he did it out of habit. "I don't know myself." Yu Jinho was beside himself with anger, and the man noticed this and asked him to relax. After which that freak said with a smile that they would continue the interview. Yu Jinho thought that he shouldn't give in to such provocations. After a few minutes of interview, the bastard put in his 2 cents again and said that in 10 years of working as a hero, this is the first time he's seen a half-elf create a guild. The man looked into her eyes and said that he wanted to know something. If South Korea were ever attacked by elves, he was interested in whose side the Fun Guild would be on. Yu Jinho finally couldn't help but look him in the eye and asked, "Does the Warrior Guild really train its members like this?" Yu Jinho looked him in the eye and said that up until this point he didn't care about the promotion at all, and he only continued to attack his guild leader. The man immediately stood up and shouted that he would decide who passed and who did not. One of the admissions committee members walked up to the others and said that they had to stop this immediately. Yu Jinho stood up and said that instead of hearing humiliation about his guild, he would rather refuse the promotion. As the half-elf listened to this, she was happy inside that Yu Jinho stood up for her. However, tears appeared on her face. After all, they had screwed up. After that, they returned to the office, where the girl was nervously drinking coffee. Yu Jinho approached her and apologized because it was because of him that they failed the interview. but she looked at him with a smile and said that everything was fine. On the other hand, she is very grateful that Yu Jinho stood up for her. After all, this was the first time someone stood up for her and she didn't care about the promotion. Yu Jinho said that it was certainly not bad, but why did she keep saying that while simultaneously pressing the refresh button? In front of them was a website with a list of those who passed the exam. The girl said that she was just interested in who passed. Yu Jinho apologized again for not getting through. And finally the girl shouted that the site had loaded. They looked at those who passed the exam and then exchanged glances. The admissions committee was now standing in the middle of their office. The main scoundrel was in front of the window, and the rest were asking, what was he thinking when he arranged all this? The man threw the apple up in the air and said that he apologized for what he had done, since he had gone a bit overboard because he had been curious. Taking a bite of the apple, the man wondered out loud how big they would grow in the end. While privately thinking that they were just arrogant bastards, he swore that they could try to get to the top as much as they wanted, because he would still destroy them. Among those who were promoted to the 4th class was the Fun Guild. Paju, Gyeonggi Province, Class 2 Monster Territory. Kim's team arrived here. The reporters and fans almost went crazy, and the security guard tried to separate them. However, a commander appeared between them and thanked everyone for coming here to support his team. Finally, he said that they could get hurt, so he suggested looking as far away from the scene as possible, after which, together with his team, he entered the monster zone. As soon as he crossed the border, he said that these dregs were so noisy that they got on his nerves. Tank noticed that there were too many people today. Kim looked at him and asked how they knew and showed up every time they had a mission. The new member to replace our hero, Kim Hyun Tae-kang, laughed and said that the woman at the entrance was so ugly that he almost threw up. Then he asked with a smile what kind of women the commander likes. The commander briefly answered that he likes pretty ones. Support said with a smile that he would bring some pretty girls with him this weekend and suggested going to a club with them. However, the sorceress reminded him that there were actually 2 women on this team and asked him not to talk about it right in front of them. The guy smiled and said that she could join if she wanted. And in order to interest the girl, he said that there would be a lot of male models there who wanted to see her in person. The girl immediately blushed and said that he was talking nonsense. The guy said with a smile that he would definitely invite handsome guys so she could join them. Inside, he thought that it was too easy because if he persuaded her, she would immediately fall for it. After that, he turned his gaze to the damager Mia and realized that the only problem was her because he had no idea what was on her mind. The girl noticed his gaze and asked what he wanted from her, but the guy immediately turned away and said that he was just thinking, but inside, he decided that he had to get to know her better. They continued to move forward, and finally they came across a group of people. Unknown people approached Kim's team and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The man immediately noticed that several months had passed. One of them looked at the team and asked where their support guy was. Kim replied that Yu Jinho had left the team, and a newcomer named Kim Kang had joined in his place. The newcomer immediately greeted them and said that it was nice to meet them, adding that his role was support. The guys said they were sorry to hear this. The commander was surprised and asked why. They said that more than a year ago, when he was in their group, he did them a great favor. And even when they think back to it now, his movements were clearly not a joke. And it's just incredible how he could move so well with such a huge bag. After that, one of them asked to give his contact in case he had not yet managed to join another guild, because taking such a guy for himself would be a great addition. After a few more words, they said goodbye. Kim asked angrily, "Did they just call this incredible?" The newbie replied that according to rumors, Yu Jinho was just getting in the way of the entire team, and those people clearly overestimated him. Yu Jinho and Kim arrived at the right place in the 4th grade area, where they fought with saber-toothed cats. There were no problems and everything went quite successfully. The guild leader said with a smile that she thought it was too early for them to go to the 4th class monster zone. But it was much easier than she expected. Yu Jinho replied that the type of basilisk they fought before was completely different. After that, the woman looked at what was left and asked how they would carry the bodies to the 1st floor. Yu Jinho answered that, in his opinion, they should call the monster processing company. While they were discussing this, they heard someone scream. The girl decided that it was probably a civilian who had not managed to evacuate, and Yu Jinho said that they should quickly save him. However, inside he thought that this voice seemed suspiciously familiar to him. When they got to the incident, they saw that in front of them was the very same CEO of the Monton company who was about to be eaten by a tiger. After they saved him, the guild leader approached him and said with a smile that she didn't expect them to meet in this place, after which she added that in her opinion it was fate. The guy immediately fell to his knees and began to apologize, saying that at that time he simply felt ill and decided to go home so as not to disturb the others. Yu Jinho looked at Kim and said that it was time to end it. After all, they were able to get good weapons thanks to him. The girl replied that Yu Jinho was too kind, and then Yu Jinho replied that since the businessman was already here, they could sign a contract to process the monsters. Yu Jinho extended his hand and said with a smile that, although they had a difficult start, in his opinion, this guy's abilities were quite good. The boy immediately began to kneel down to thank him for his help, and said that from now on he would work together with them. After this, he ran away and asked to leave the bodies in the building for him. The girl thought for a moment and asked what they would do if this guy deceived them again. However, Yu Jinho replied that it was okay because they still needed someone like this guy because even with the basilisk, he still made sure to collect the loot. And now that something has become clear, it will be much easier to weave. While Yu Jinho was saying this, he was interrupted by an unknown voice that shouted that the heroes should stop hunting innocent creatures. A man with a microphone in his hand spoke loudly about how these monsters also deserve the right to live. Yu Jinho looked at them and said that this was their first encounter with an international alliance for the protection of beings. The organization claims that monsters can exist with humans just like normal plants and animals, and they have caused great damage with their recent actions and protests in the Monster Zone area. The girl looked at our hero and asked if he agreed with his opinion, to which Yu Jinho briefly replied that they were talking nonsense. And he asked whether they would say the same words if they saw monsters killing people right out of the blue. While he was talking about this, they attacked our heroes, saying that monsters must live. A few seconds later, Yu Jinho and Kim were surrounded. Yu Jinho took hold of his blade and asked, "Is this just a stupid joke?" Several people immediately approached the corpses of the animals and began to say that on behalf of all human beings they were asking for forgiveness. One of the girls looked at our hero and asked how he could call himself a hero after doing this. Yu Jinho thought that these people were really annoying, but heroes can't touch ordinary people. So he would have to choose to resist them until the Hero Association sends help or try to escape. Suddenly, Yu Jinho heard a familiar voice. An earth dragon appeared and asked the people to disperse because he had business with this guy. With the help of his power, the earth dragon separated the people from them and was left alone with our hero. Some call him the earth dragon, some call him the clown, where it is also known as an earthquake. The man said all these things out loud, and coming closer he said that he liked it best when he was called scoundrel. Yu Jinho looked at all this and wondered why this guy was constantly showing up and making a fuss. Did he just have nothing better to do? But everything turned out to be much more serious. The earth dragon summoned his elemental, which grabbed everyone with its stone tentacles. And then he lifted the people up, high above the ground. People immediately started begging him to let them go, but Yu Jinho couldn't understand what was going on. Was this really how a national hero should behave with civilians? Yu Jinho thought that it was incredible. He dealt with all the civilians without harming them. His control was so precise that it simply made one wonder. The man approached our hero and said that he apologized for making him wait, and also added that he heard that Yu Jinho passed the exam for promotion to the 4th grade. Yu Jinho said with a smile that it was only thanks to the excellent examiner. The earth dragon laughed and said that that guy was indeed a bit hot-tempered. After that, the man smiled and said that he noticed that Yu Jinho had become stronger since their last meeting. He took a few more steps forward and said that he was interested to know which of them was stronger now. Yu Jinho looked at him and asked, "Did he really come here just to find out this?" After that, they heard a strange noise and saw that there were more people around who were surprised that the earth dragon had come and was talking to our hero and this girl. The earth dragon said that there were too many extra eyes here and it would be better to move to another place. After that, he went to the construction site with our team. Yu Jinho looked around and found out that this was the headquarters of the Dice Guild. He also noticed that there were too many people here. The earth dragon said that they were currently working on expanding the underground training complex. And although it was a bit noisy, you had to be patient. As he entered, Yu Jinho thought about how it felt like he had entered a quiet cafe where the sounds of construction had completely disappeared. Kim smiled and said that it was simply unbelievable. After all, they couldn't cover such a large building with a magical barrier. She also began to talk about how they probably borrowed a huge amount of money to build such a large building and cover it all with a giant barrier, as befits one of the greatest guilds. They didn't spare any money at all when it came to their headquarters. Yu Jinho asked if it was really that hard to do, and the girl added that she thought they spent at least 20 billion on it. Yu Jinho was surprised and the manager approached them, thanking them for noticing the excellent magical barrier. The woman adjusted her glasses and said that they had almost guessed the price. Her name was Park Kyung, and she was the deputy head of Yi and also the manager. The Earth Dragon greeted the deputy chief and said that she should prepare everything for the meeting. She immediately grabbed his face and asked where he had disappeared to in the middle of the workday, ignoring his schedule. Yu Jinho couldn't believe that she dared to act like that towards an Earth Dragon. After all this, they went to the meeting room and the Earth Dragon took the tea and asked what Yu Jinho thought. Why did he bring him here? Yu Jinho looked at the Earth Dragon and said that he was sure that it was because Yu Jinho possessed the Wind Elemental. After these words, the man summoned his elemental and said that Yu Jinho had guessed correctly. The man petted the dog and said that Yu Jinho should say hello because in front of him was his elemental partner named Mumu. Yu Jinho remembered what he saw before and thought that the difference between the appearances was simply huge. Mumu said that he needed to help with the construction and that he had a lot of things to do, but the Earth Dragon said that it would only take a few minutes. Yu Jinho greeted the Earth Elemental, and the dog began to sniff his hands. Kim was simply delighted, and Yu Jinho did not understand what this animal was doing. The Earth Dragon looked at our hero and asked if he could release his elemental. Yu Jinho agreed and concentrated his energy. It was an ordinary clod of air. The trapped Earth Dragon said that he expected something like this and asked what the name of this elemental was. Yu Jinho answered that her name was Sylph. The Earth Dragon looked up and said that this was the very reason why he wanted to meet. After all, the only elemental discovered so far in this area is the Mumu. And this has not changed in the 17 years of his work as an elementalist. The man looked at our hero and said that he also checked his boards, but could not find anything related to this elemental. And the only question that raises suspicion is why, for some unknown reason, our heroes left the first class and joined the fun. However, it makes no sense to conclude that Yu Jinho received an elemental in the new guild, while the other facts are unknown. After that, the Earth Dragon looked into the eyes of our hero and asked how he signed a contract with the Spirit of the Wind. Kim said that it would be better if she explained and said that before this the Wind Elemental had another owner. The girl said directly that before this, her mother had owned the elemental. The man thought for a moment and said that it was really amazing, because who would have thought that Yu Jinho would end up signing a contract with elements of the Great Ernahas, because this had never happened before. Also inside, the Earth Dragon was thinking that before everyone thought that when the owner dies, his elemental also disappears. But it seems they still haven't fully understood about the creatures called elementals. The man laughed and said that although this did not dispel his doubts, he would stop there and get down to business. The man raised two fingers and said that he had another reason why he wanted to talk to them. The man's gaze changed and he said that he was going to be frank, and as the head of the Dice Guild, he wanted to lead their Fun Guild. And he is going to buy 100% of the shares of the Fun Guild for 20 billion. Hearing such a sum, the girl immediately jumped up and asked if he was really serious about this, to which the Earth Dragon replied that he would never joke about such things, and that he could also give them even more if they thought that this was not enough. He also added that he would leave the order in Kim's hands, and if she wanted to keep the team of 2 people as it is now, then she could arrange it or hire another hero if they wanted. He also added that he would personally teach our hero to use elemental magic and would in no way interfere with the team's activities. The man looked at the guys with a smile and asked if they agreed to the conditions, by the way. Kaka immediately responded that this was definitely a great offer, but it happened too suddenly, to which the Earth Dragon replied that it would give them time to think. He said that the sooner they answer, the better. However, Yu Jinho immediately replied that he was not going to join. After that, he rose from his seat and proudly declared that they would never sell the guild to Fun. Hearing this refusal, Kim almost lost consciousness. Meanwhile, the small businessman finished packing his important things, and when he went outside, he wondered what had happened here. He thought that he had cleaned everything up as he was asked to, but he couldn't find our hero anywhere. Yu Jinho continued to say that he was not going to join the Dice Guild, and he also added that he heard that they had spent about 20 billion to cover this place with a magical barrier. Yu Jinho stood up again and said with a smile that such an amount was not enough because their Fun Guild, like the Dice Guild, would become a great guild. Kim, with tears in her eyes, grabbed our hero by the clothes and asked why he decides everything alone. However, after that, they heard the loud laughter of the Earth Dragon. The man's gaze changed and he asked, "Does Yu Jinho really think that he can turn a guild consisting of 2 people into a great guild?" He also asked if Yu Jinho was being too self-righteous. But Yu Jinho looked at him with a calm gaze and said that it was just confidence. The Earth Dragon adjusted his glasses and thought that this guy really sounds very confident and, as expected, he is really an interesting specimen. The Earth Dragon raised his hands with a smile and said that the deal had fallen through. After that, He snapped his fingers and said that if Yu Jinho had come this far, then he deserved a small prize. After a click, the deputy head entered the room, holding the magic crystal that Yu Jinho had obtained from the basilisk. Yu Jinho was surprised and asked why the Earth Dragon was returning this artifact. The Earth Dragon said, with a smile, that his association had finished their research and he was going to give it to her right after they bought the Fun Guild. Yu Jinho said that he would gladly and gratefully accept this gift, and also asked why the Earth Dragon was causing so much fuss. But as soon as Yu Jinho took the magic crystal in his hands, a sylph appeared and instantly merged with it and illuminated the room with a bright light. The Earth Dragon looked at this with a smile and said that elementalists can increase their power by absorbing it from such magic crystals. Yu Jinho saw that something appeared inside, and the Earth Dragon said that if Yu Jinho continued to absorb magic crystals, then over time he would be able to materialize sylph like Mumu. Let's move it to a completely different place, the Korean branch. There was a girl working here and she received a call from a client and heard that her cat had turned into a creature. The worker said that the woman could be sure of her safety and that agents would soon come and carefully catch him. There were many workers here and they were all discussing small work issues. This place is called the Union for the Protection of Creatures. One of the workers watched the news about their company doing volunteer work and said that they should spread the word that there is good in people. After which the girl smiled and said that in time, other people would understand this too. They continued talking about this when suddenly they heard a strange noise. Their pet monster was screaming loudly because he wanted to eat. One of the girls said that she would go and feed him now. After that, she opened the door and asked herself out loud, what should she give to the monster this time? After thinking for a bit, her gaze fell on the old granny. The girl said it was surprising that the old lady was still alive, and the boss added that she was too lively for an elderly person. However, despite this, they still took the old woman and threw her into the monster's cage. After looking at all this, the worker said that their cat is incredibly cute when he eats. After that, she asked why he didn't bring the rest, to which the boss replied that it would be better not to overfeed him and just bring another one here for dinner. They continued to talk about all sorts of work-related issues when suddenly the garage opened and the manager arrived. A man with a scar on his face and glasses got out of the car and greeted all the workers with a smile. This was Im Min-soo, the manager of the Korean branch of the MSZS. One of the women asked him how his business trip went, and he replied that he brought with him a lot of nice and kind children, how they are all in the neighboring building. Therefore, it will be necessary to redirect them to the storage later. After that, he stood in the middle of the office and said that he had good news. Why did he take out a gun with a strange injection? And said that the prototype of the object that their partners had been studying for a long time was finally ready. The man walked forward a little and asked if they remembered the basilisk that was recently discovered in Buchan. The man continued to say that although they had successfully created a variety by giving him a magic crystal, the resistance was very low and his body was prone to corrosion, and he also had problems with control. With these words, the man approached the repairman and said that this time everything would be different. He smiled and aimed the injection at the monster and said he would make it even better. And then he fired, and the changes began almost instantly. The entire office gave a standing ovation. However, let's return to our heroes. They again went to the fourth class of the monster zone. Kim noticed that this time, a barrier appeared. Yu Jinho replied that after yesterday's conflict, everyone came to the conclusion that it would not be possible to quickly get rid of the cats. Also, our heroes added that if they are lucky, today they will be able to get a magic crystal from a variety. But Montan appeared behind him. The guy loudly asked where Yu Jinho was yesterday. Yu Jinho greeted him, but the boy was angry that they left him alone after asking him to take care of that monster yesterday. After this, the businessman laughed loudly, and he showed them the phone, saying that he wondered if they would be able to keep their composure after seeing this. He showed them the bill and stated that yesterday he sold absolutely everything he found, taking into account the previous basilisks, and now their budget is 500 million won. The guy laughed madly and Kim couldn't believe it. He kept saying that since this type of basilisk was discovered for the first time, he was able to sell it at a very high price. Kim fell to her knees and said that she had absolute confidence in him from the very beginning. Finally, the guy said it was time to discuss the commission, and stated that he usually takes a 10% commission for collecting and selling. However, Yu Jinho immediately stated that he was going to give him a maximum of 4%. They continued to argue, and Yu Jinho didn't want to give even 1% more. Kim decided to take a break from their screams, and looking back saw a huge mouse. The expression on her face was one of bewilderment. However, it turned out that it was not a monster, but a tamer who uses a mouse Yu Jinho immediately said that it was Min Yuri. She is the leader of the Snowflake Guild, and there is no one else in the guild besides her. Yu Jinho said that she is known for hunting only saber-toothed tigers. Kim asked in surprise why this was so. I'll figure it out, and replied that she didn't know, but she was clearly obsessed with them. Meanwhile, Kim said with a smile that the tamer looked simply amazing. Yu Jinho looked at her and said that she needed to quickly enter the monster zone because the tamer specializes in hunting saber-toothed cats. And if they were late, her chinchilla would take everything in its path. However, as soon as Yu Jinho said this, the chinchilla instantly appeared right in front of him. She immediately said that everything was fine and that Yu Jinho just had to stand still. Yu Jinho froze in place and used selection to find out that the probability of the monster in front attacking him was less than 20%. The tamer came a little closer and said that this was quite strange because her chinchilla had never been interested in other people before. After that, the girl fixed her hair and introduced herself with a smile, saying that her name was Min Yuri and that she was from the Snowflake Guild. Yu Jinho extended his hand to her while being licked by the chinchilla and said that he was from the Fun Guild and that his guild leader, Kim Sihu, was standing next to him. The tamer thought for a moment and asked if our hero had any hamsters at home, to which Yu Jinho replied that he had no animals at all. The girl thought about it and said that it was very strange that her animal was behaving so strangely for no reason. Montan instantly ran up to her and fell to his knees, saying that it was a great honor for him to meet her. After that, he introduced himself and said that he was from a company that collects the remains of monsters and he was its CEO. Therefore, if she needed help in order to deal with the bodies of monsters, she could contact him. The girl immediately replied that she did not need it. After this, the guy noticed someone staring at him. Chinchilla hugged Montaigne and started licking him. Tamir tried to help, and the other players did not understand why this girl, who was nicknamed the Ice Woman, was communicating so nicely with another guild. The tamer noticed this and apologized for attracting other people's attention. After that, she took her animal and said that she was going to go there first, wishing the Fun Guild good luck. Yu Jinho looked at her and thought that the last time he saw news about her was about 3 or 4 years ago, and judging by her popularity, she should have already been promoted to the 3rd grade, so why is she still in the 4th? Yu Jinho threw these thoughts aside and decided that in any case it was not his job to do it, and there was no point in thinking about it. With these thoughts, Yu Jinho and the guild leader headed to the monster zone. Kim wondered what was going on here. After all, they had already passed 5 floors. Well, the monsters were still not visible. Yu Jinho thought for a bit and replied that it was possible. The thing is that the other guilds had already cleared everything out. After that, he looked up sadly and said that there was nothing to be done here and they should continue to go up to look for monsters. The girl thought for a bit and said that it would be better to use the elevator, to which he replied that he could get stuck halfway up. After a few more floors, a tired Kim said to Braid that asking a mage to go up the stairs was too harsh. Yu Jinho replied that mages also needed to develop their endurance. Finally, they met the first living creature on their way. It was a man who, noticing them, asked who they were. Yu Jinho slowly raised his head and then the man asked, "Didn't he see the sign on the first floor that said, the building from 207 to 209 floor are the Knife Guild points? A point is a place created to take a favorable position in the monster zone. If a large guild occupies a point, then ordinary guilds can only come to terms with it. And this is especially true when it comes to real guilds of only 2 people. However, our guild is quite unusual." Yu Jinho looked him straight in the eyes and ordered him to hide. After this, Yu Jinho added that he knew that occupying space in the monster's territory was prohibited and was going to file a complaint against their actions to the Ministry of Heroes. The Knife Guild laughed and said that the Ministry of Heroes would not care about the corpses of several heroes. Yu Jinho counted everyone he saw in front of him in his head and found out that there was 1 tank, 2 warriors, and 1 mage in front of him. After that, Yu Jinho asked, "Are they really being threatened?" While he was saying this, he was thinking that due to the peculiarities of the location of this emergency staircase, it would be difficult for 4 people to go down at once. And using his ability, he learned that the probability of victory in a battle with this team is as much as 80%. As soon as Yu Jinho learned this number, he immediately rushed to attack. The head of the Knife Guild did not believe that Yu Jinho was so crazy as to enter into a conflict with another guild that outnumbered him. So, as the skirmish was inevitable, a small massacre began on the 207th floor. Taking advantage of the commotion, Yu Jinho and the guild leader slipped forward and were about to escape from here. However, they had to face that shell again, and after a few hits, Yu Jinho showed his full strength. The guild leader couldn't believe that Yu Jinho was actually a level 4. But as soon as he thought about it, he was already on the ground, looking up at our hero. Once on the ground, the man shouted that Yu Jinho would not go far and that he could not be punished. After that, Yu Jinho laughed. And then the guild captain looked around and heard one of the mages saying that their opponents were too strong. Our team moved forward, and after a few floors we heard someone screaming. It was real screaming from the evacuation stairs. Yu Jinho went to help and saw a type of saber-toothed cat in front of him. Our hero's ability, meanwhile, indicated that the chances were equal to 0.5%. Kim understood everything instantly and said that he was beyond their capabilities. Yu Jinho replied that it was just a variation. However, inside he was thinking that this was the first time he had seen such an incredible variation. Meanwhile, the Knife Guild was trembling with fear. Yu Jinho looked at them and said that they needed to unite in order to confront this monster. Guildmaster Knife turned around and started running away, shouting along the way that 4 people wouldn't be able to handle this kind. Yu Jinho thought about how those cowardly bastards had abandoned their first chance, and then looked at his opponent again and was convinced that it would be impossible for the two of them to deal with a 4th-class variety. While Yu Jinho was thinking about this, the monster had already rushed to attack. Yu Jinho immediately took out his blade to defend against the first strike, and it took a huge amount of effort. He thought that there was incredible power in front of him, and if he had not covered the sword of his element, it would have broken long ago. After making a few more strikes, Yu Jinho realized that the only way to deal with this monster was to finish it off in one move. Kim, realizing the situation, immediately used the slowing wind to restrict his movements, after which Yu Jinho made his signature strike. However, he realized with horror that the creature had dodged. Yu Jinho didn't have time to change his stance, and the monster sent him into the wall. After spitting out some blood, Yu Jinho wondered how this monster could be so fast. Immediately after this, the monster changed his victim and attacked the girl. Kim realized with horror that he would not be able to dodge. And at that moment, when she had already managed to say goodbye to her life, a chinchilla appeared that she already knew well. At great speed, these two monsters broke through the wall and found themselves on the street. After which Kim heard the voice of the tamer whom I was talking about, that she heard an explosion and decided to check. However, I couldn't even think that they would also end up here. The girl walked up with a confident step and said that she was glad to see the Fun Guild again. After that, she looked at our hero who was lying unconscious and said that it looked like they would have had huge problems if she had come in a little later. After that, the girl looked at the street and said that she was going to kill this creature, and Kim should take care of Yu Jinho coming to his senses, the head of the guild. Fun immediately said that she couldn't handle this alone, so she needed to ask other heroes for help. However, the Tamir immediately added that she knew these monsters better than anyone else, and there was no need to even worry. After these words, the girl jumped down from the building, where her chinchilla was fighting now. While in midair, she used her ice magic. The monster jumped back at the very last moment, and the monster's species was frozen in ice. However, the monster immediately came to his senses and destroyed the ice, breaking free. The tamer was surprised because this monster could still get back on its feet even after being hit by so many ice arrows. After that, for example, she prepared to use this skill again and said that in any case the result would not change and she would win. And she hit the mark perfectly. After all, despite the fact that this variety has enormous strength, it also has enormous weakness. His legs are too weak, said the tamer, and added that after such an injury he would no longer be able to stand up. The tamer knew very well that the extraordinary mobility that this monster possessed was due to its flexibility. But if their muscles contracted due to the cold, the joints would not withstand their weight and would collapse. The devil adjusted her glove and said that their decomposition had ended back when the monster missed the blow of the ice arrow. Kim, who I was watching all this, instead of helping my partner, said that it was simply incredible. The entire species that they had been so hard at in theory on the 5th had just been so easily destroyed. After that, the girl suddenly remembered that she actually had to save her friend from death, and immediately approached him. Yu Jinho replied that they urgently needed to help the tamer. However, Kim said that there was nothing to worry about anymore, because the tamer had already taken care of everything. Yu Jinho, with his skill, knew everything perfectly well, and quietly said that this was not the end, because the probability of her defeating this species was negligible. The tamer meanwhile approached the immobilized variation of the monsters and said that she would end this as painlessly as possible. But as soon as she got too close, the monster suddenly rose up and let out a roar that could be heard throughout the area. All the monsters within a radius of several kilometers immediately appeared right in front of the tamer. As soon as she realized her situation, her face turned pale. Jinho looked down and saw the situation, then looked at the guild master and asked if she could use levitation. To which she replied that, although it was not perfect, she could use it to some extent. Jinho said that it was great and suggested that she use it on his signal. After that, Jinho grabbed her by the waist, which made the girl a little embarrassed. And he used the acceleration, quickly going down. Many monsters rushed at the tamer. However, she dealt with the first couple of them with ease. Confidence returned to her face, which, however, immediately disappeared when she realized that she now had too many blind spots. She looked at them and thought that there were too many monsters here, and she needed to quickly find a variety in order to kill it as quickly as possible, and then perhaps the pack would all run away. Kim used levitation, and Jinho realized that she had managed to slow down their fall. However, she was not strong enough to stop them in midair, so even though he wanted to pin down his energy, it turned out that there was no other way out now. Right above the crowd of these monsters, Jinho used a wind bomb. He then prepared for his signature move, realizing that he had to aim straight ahead like he had when he had killed that basilisk variety. With these thoughts, he rushed forward towards these monsters, having riddled some of them with instant movements. After this long burst of energy, Jinho fell tiredly to one knee, his mind spinning with thoughts of how he tried to use the energy as efficiently as possible, but it still took a lot of his strength. The tamer immediately ran up to him and said that she actually asked them to stay away. Jinho slowly stood up and asked, "Is that all she wants to say to those who came to her aid?" While they were arguing about this, new cats appeared. Jinho understood that these were not the same ones but simply their leader, summoning more and more cats. The tamer also noticed this and said that the leader's joints should have already fallen apart. However, Jinho added that he did not know how, but it seemed to him that the cat could restore them. So he added that he had never seen such healing abilities in cats before. Jinho looked at me and said that most of them were knocked down and only 2 were injured, so if they worked together, he was sure that they could do it. However, as soon as Jinho said this, she immediately started running away. Jinho didn't get up when she suddenly became so reckless, but he said out loud that it was no wonder she was working alone. Looking at the guild leader, the locked Jinho said that he needed to be covered. Meanwhile, some tamer was making her way through the crowds of cats, until finally he found himself in front of his main goal. Well, as soon as she found him, she immediately realized the difference in their strength, because a moment later, the cat was already ready to finish her off. Instead of hitting the girl, the monster grabbed her and prepared to bite her head off. The Tamir could not believe that he had regained his strength so quickly and was now going to kill her. However, Jinho immediately appeared, shouting at full speed that cold food could give you a stomachache. After that, with one deft movement, he cut off the monster's left arm. Kim used her magic to depersonalize him, and Jinho swung his blade, thinking that this would be the final blow. However, the tamer suddenly appeared in front of him and shouted that Jinho shouldn't kill him. Jinho stopped and asked what she was doing if they had to kill him before he recovered. The girl explained that she needed a live saber-toothed cat because she had to capture the species without killing it. Jinho replied that this was just nonsense and that it would never be possible to capture her alive. Meanwhile, the monster's body began to change and swell. Jinho didn't understand what was going on here at all. And as the monster grew larger, it called more and more wildcats here. Jinho realized that the situation was dire, and his energy was almost gone. Suddenly, all the cats were washed up on the ground. Out of nowhere, a familiar man appeared who said that he saw amateurs in front of him. And despite the fact that they had passed the promotion exams, they still couldn't figure out a couple of cats, which made him very disappointed. Another man said that it turns out that these 2 were not child prodigies after all. However, one of the girls added that despite this, she was still impressed that they lasted as long as they could. The mage behind everyone for 5th said that we need to stop chatting from the batteries with this matter. The same unknown man who was taking the serum to this place was watching all this, and laughing, he added that they had finally appeared, because he had been waiting all the time for the big shots to finally appear, and they should be from the 3rd-class team of the Dice Guild. The man thought sadly that he had hoped that the team from the 1st class would join the battle. However, it turns out that he wanted too much. Let's find out who this is. This is the manager of the Korean branch named Minsu Lim. One of his subordinates approached him and asked what the next steps would be. To which he replied, "Do you think that they have nothing more to do here for now and that they need to retreat for a while?" Finally, he said that all this was not a big loss. However, the fact that the energy crystal dispersed throughout the body at the last moment is a problem. But still, the power that it stores is simply impressive. So it's time for them to continue working according to their schedule to keep up. After all, a great future awaits them. The third-class hero guild approached the huge body of the monster and wondered what it was. Their captain said that it looked like the hero department had a lot of work to do to investigate it. A week has passed since this incident. Yu Jinho read the news and healed his wounds. Montan entered the guild building and said that the monster territory they had visited had been on all the news for several days, and it looked like they had been through a lot. Yu Jinho replied that he would not discuss it with ordinary people because he was forbidden. The boy immediately stated that they were actually business partners, and he had the right to know about everything. Yu Jinho thought that maybe he shouldn't have hired this guy after all. 8 heroes died that day. The hero department greatly underestimated the number of cats hiding in the underground parking lot. And the sudden appearance of the variation provoked an influx of these monsters, which led to the tragedy. Yu Jinho took off the bandages and thought that he had a bad feeling, because this was all too well planned to be a simple coincidence, and moreover, the mutation of the species was unlike anything he had ever seen. Yu Jinho closed his eyes and thought that maybe he didn't need to think about it so much, since the hero division would soon present the results of the investigation. Meanwhile, Monten looked around and said to Order that he just realized that he hadn't seen Kim today. Yu Jinho replied that she had some personal matters to take care of, so she took a week off. While they were discussing this, the phone suddenly rang. The cleaner said that he had never seen this phone ring before. Yu Jinho slowly stood up and said that this was the guild hotline that all guilds have, but who could call the guild hotline? Yu Jinho picked up the phone and introduced himself by saying that this was the Fun Guild. However, on the other end of the line, he heard the voice of Min Yuri from Snowflake. The girl immediately apologized for the fact that I had to call her on the hotline, but said that it was the only way she found to contact them. She and the hero said that there was nothing to worry about, after which the girl asked how his injuries were. Yu Jinho immediately replied that a whole week had already passed and his wounds had almost healed, so there was nothing to worry about. After thinking for a bit, the hero asked her how she was doing, and the girl replied that she was doing great, after which a locked silence arose. Yu Jinho understood that it was unlikely that she would call on a hotline and not just ask how he was feeling. And just as he thought about it, she said she wanted to meet today. Kim, meanwhile, was busy with personal matters and spoke with her father, who said that he heard that she had recently encountered a species in the monster zone, to which the girl replied that she was fine and that he should not worry unnecessarily. Hearing these words, the father added that she needs to be extremely careful in the territory of fourth-class monsters, because the support that stands behind becomes a target more often than she might think. The girl said that they had already talked about this 100 times and she remembered it very well. The father did not calm down and added that if she saw invaders, she should run and just not look back. After all these lectures, the man suddenly said that he was pleased to realize that she was working with a reliable guy. Kim smiled and said that Yu Jinho was a huge support for her guild. After all, if she didn't want him, she would still be there somewhere before that. Her father said with a warm smile that he was very pleased to hear this, and also expressed the hope that one day she too would be able to meet him. Her father's name was Gon Oh, and he was the chief researcher at the Kyoto Institute for Monster Research. The man looked at the photograph of his late wife and said that he would be interested in meeting the hero who inherited his mother's element, Kim. While they were still talking, an assistant suddenly burst into his room and said that they needed him to urgently study a sample that had just arrived. The man said that he would start right away and said goodbye to his daughter, saying that he had to go. After all, something had happened. Finally, the girl asked when he was going to come to Korea. The man immediately replied that he would definitely come to the anniversary of her mother's death, after which he added that they would better talk later and hung up. The girl looked at the switched-off phone and thought that this was so like him because he always said only what he needed. After that, she stood up straight and thought that it was time for her to do some housework. But as soon as she thought about it and the cool garbage collector called her, Kim looked at the contact and wondered, why is he calling her on her day off? Meanwhile, Yu Jinho stood in the middle of the city, dressed in a closed outfit, as if he was about to go on a date. On his right hand was a bracelet that Montan had given him with the words that it was a lucky unicorn whisker that would bring good luck. However, Yu Jinho did not understand at all why he needed luck, and he put on this bracelet only so that the cleaner would stop whining. After some time, the tamer finally appeared in front of him. She apologized for making him wait. Yu Jinho first noticed that she looked different when they met in the monster zone. Yu Jinho smiled and said that he actually just arrived. The girl sighed with relief and said that she was happy to hear that. After that, she added that she had booked a table at a restaurant and suggested going there. Yu Jinho agreed. But at that moment, 2 dubious individuals were watching them. It was Montan and Kim who couldn't believe they were actually going on a date. Kim thought with resentment that the tamer had probably come up with some kind of cunning plan to take this guy to her guild. After some time, Yu Jinho was already chatting nicely with Min and enjoying the food at the establishment. After that, they spent a nice evening, which could really be called a date. They were being watched all this time. Realizing that they were definitely on a date, Kim became angry and hit Montaigne. After that, she got offended and was about to leave when the garbage man asked her if she was really not going to do anything, to which the girl replied that she shouldn't care that he was dating someone. Even though she said it, inside she was thinking that she knew perfectly well that it shouldn't bother her. But because of all this, she felt incredibly irritated. It was already evening, and Yu Jinho said with a smile that it was really fun, and he hadn't gone out or had fun for a long time. Thus, the Tamir also thanked him, saying that she now feels much better. As soon as she said this, our hero's face immediately changed, and he said that it was time to tell him why she wanted to see him today. Yu Jinho looked at her and added that she clearly didn't ask to meet just to spend time together. And all this time he was waiting for her to tell him something. After these words, the girl looked away. They approached the hospital, and she looked up saying that she was doing something that Yu Jinho was looking to keep her company. Yu Jinho asked why they went to the hospital, and then the tamer replied that her sister was undergoing treatment there. They went inside while Yu Jinho tried to figure out what her sister was sick with. As soon as they entered the room, Yu Jinho was surprised to find that his ability had activated on its own. Yu Jinho looked at Sister Min, and the selection issued a notification that the target was unconscious and had a discoloration syndrome, an energy that had already progressed to the terminal stage. Min looked at her sister and said that it was because of her that she only hunted cats. After all, 4 years ago, a cat attacked them, and since then the sister has been in coma. The doctors say they don't know the reason. Yu Jinho said that this explains a lot. Min, despite her sister, said that she thought that if she continued, someone would be able to find a clue. But it seems she made a mistake because she thought that healing the variety could help her sister overnight, which she saw today did not show any connection. After these words, the girl approached our hero and bowed politely. She said that she apologized for behaving like that day. She also added that she knew that he and the head of the Fun Guild were in danger because of her actions. Yu Jinho immediately raised his hands and tried to calm him down, saying that he understood her perfectly. As soon as he said that, his ability worked again. The system told our hero that Min Yuri from the Snowflake Guild was the most important figure for the growth of the Fun Guild. And now, one of the 4 key events has been collected. Looking at this, Yu Jinho thought that he had seen this probability statistic before. When they saved Montan in that monster zone, analysis showed that this young man is a vital figure for the growth of the Fun Guild. Yu Jinho thought that at that moment, it seemed to him that his ability was directing him towards some kind of quest, because before, he had never seen his analysis skill behave exactly like this. That's why Yu Jinho then decided to hire this guy to work with their guild to see the skill's response. And now this is the second time this skill has worked. The ability activated that day worked on Min Yuri this time. And if Yu Jinho found one of the 4, then including this girl, he needs 3 more people to complete the quest. While Yu Jinho was thinking about this, his head started to hurt. The girl noticed it and asked if everything was okay. Yu Jinho replied that everything was fine and he was just a little dizzy. While he was saying this, he was thinking about how when he discovered this guild, his ability predicted that there was a 99% chance that after he joined, it would become a large guild. And now, out of nowhere, additional requirements had appeared. Yu Jinho thought that he didn't even suspect that his analysis skill could be bullied so much. After that, the headache went away. Yu Jinho combed his hair back and decided that he would do whatever was necessary no matter what. Yu Jinho looked at the girl and asked how many years she had been hunting cats. The girl thought for a bit and replied that it had been 4 years already. Yu Jinho looked at her sick sister and asked if after all this time she hadn't found any clues on how to bring her sister out of her coma. The girl looked down sadly and said that Yu Jinho was right. Then Yu Jinho turned his gaze to her and said that he didn't know all the details, so it might not be for him to tell. However, if she still hadn't found anything useful, does it seem to her that it would be worth thinking about a new approach? Yu Jinho took something in his hand and then rolled up his hand and said that he was trying to explain it with an example. Because if you get a cut or a wound, you disinfect the area and apply some ointment. Yu Jinho continued to talk about how this is such that one of the components of this ointment is Centella asiatica, also known as Indian pennywort. This is a common plant that can be found in the mountains and fields. It has antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and other beneficial properties. These plants have not yet turned into monsters, but many researchers hope that this will happen. After all, direct use of the leaves or stems of the plant will not help to treat open wounds, and it is the extract of this plant that has healing properties. Yujinho continued to say that it was interesting to think about because, although these small plants had nothing to do with why they were getting injured and did not somehow refuse to be part of the healing process, Yujinho looked at his sick sister and said that perhaps this girl had the same situation. Maybe the reason for her critical condition was something else that they didn't know yet, and it wasn't related to the criminal cats. While Yujinho was talking about all this, everyone understood that this girl knew everything perfectly well without him. But she is trying to move on because her desire to hunt saber-toothed animals arose from an obsession with revenge against the monsters who did this to her sister. After finishing his speech, Yujinho said that he had a proposal. After that, he immediately said that he would like to hire her officially. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked if Yujinho was really saying that he wanted her to join the Fun Guild. Yujinho briefly replied that this is exactly what he wanted. After all, if she agrees, then his guild will do everything in its power to help find a way to cure her sister. The girl looked at him with embarrassment when he said this, and Yujinho continued to insist that he doesn't make empty promises, because they can include this in the contract if it gives some guarantees. Yujinho tried to use his analysis to find out what the chance was that they could save this girl. However, his skill gave the same information as before. This meant that he had no way of knowing whether he liked this girl. Despite this, Yujinho thought that he still needed to recruit Min by any means necessary. Meanwhile, Min looked down nervously and said that she wanted to announce her decision after thinking it over a bit. Yujinho said that it wouldn't be a problem, and then the girl thanked him for these words and also for the day they spent together. At that moment, Yujinho was thinking that the best thing to do now was to figure everything out herself. After all this, the hero said goodbye to us and said that he did not want to stay for long and now leave her alone with herself. The girl said that everything was fine and apologized for dragging him here. When Yujinho said goodbye, he noticed that he had Montena's bracelet on his hand. He immediately took it off and said that he wanted to give something to Min. Yujinho handed it over and said that this bracelet was made from Lucky Whisker. It brings good luck, and he thought it would look better on Sister Min. The girl took the bracelet with a smile and said that she was sure that Soyeon would like it. Yujinho said that he had to go already and also expressed hope for a quick response from Min Yuri. The girl said goodbye with a warm smile. Meanwhile, in the main building of the heroes, the man said that they had already surrendered long enough, and they must continue the meeting even if one of the guilds is not present. The talk was about the Karaz Guild. The Earth Dragon scratched his head and asked, who was making the appointment at such an unholy hour? On the way, he thought out loud that it didn't look like there was anyone important there. However, his assistant told him that she was already tired of repeating that they needed to hurry. The Earth Dragon replied that he already had a lot of things to do. Why did he have to come here because of all the people? When he walked inside, he was immediately told that he was talking too much for someone who was late for the meeting. This was said by the head of the Warrior Guild, Khan. The Earth Dragon smiled and said that he was glad to see that someone had returned from the dead, and added that he thought that his entire guild had fallen in the first-class monster zone. Khan immediately stood up and loudly declared that it would take more than that to destroy his entire guild and that they had cleared out this monster zone 1,000,000 years ago. One of the main ones said that he doesn't understand why he has to be so loud, and also added that despite being the head of the guild, he still acts very immaturely. It was the Red Hall Guildmaster, Beck, who was now smiling and saying that he thought the Earth Dragon had learned his lesson after they argued. However, they saw that it had no effect. The two were bitter rivals, having already had a total of 103 matches. However, the Earth Dragon had won only 51 of them and had lost 52. The leader of the Snowball Guild, Kim Min-jung, said that she doesn't understand why they are still trying to tear each other's throats out since they act like children. The Earth Dragon sat down in his place and put his feet up on the table, saying that you see the words are just as nonsense as before. The man with glasses said that since all the guild leaders were gathered here, it was time to start the meeting. He opened the folder with the documents and said that he urgently gathered them all here today because in the incident with the fourth-class monster zone that happened a week ago in a nearby city, new details appeared. They found evidence indicating the involvement of MSAs. Hearing this information, the Earth Dragon immediately smiled and asked if this meant that they could break right into their headquarters and smash it to pieces. The head of the Snowball Guild said that he should think before speaking, because they operate on a global level, and one proof of their involvement is not enough for the heroes to be able to do whatever they want. The man with glasses stated that she was right, and the hero division did not have enough evidence to take action, so if they were not careful, it would develop into a diplomatic problem. After that, he asked everyone present to look at the screen and said that this was a photograph of a type of cat. The others thought about it and said that they had never seen such monsters before. The man with glasses said that, as everyone can see, this variety is very different from the usual monster. And the hero department receives reports from such deformed variants. The photo on the screen changed, and the man in glasses said that a species of red weaver ant had been discovered on a nearby mountain. And a few months ago, in one of the private country clubs, a large number of variable plants appeared. These monsters, like the cat, were deformed. One of the men said that he did not understand why they were being told this, because there was nothing unusual about the appearance of new monsters. The man in glasses said that it was true. However, based on external signs alone, these monsters cannot be classified as special species. But they did DNA testing at the Monster Research Unit and discovered a new genetic variation unique to this breed of cat. After which the man paused for a moment and said that inside him was an energy crystal, a special material called an energy crystal, which can be found in almost all varieties. And after conducting research, I came to the conclusion that the variety appears only when these crystals, which contain a huge amount of energy, merge with monsters. Although these crystals and energies may still be the subject of intense pursuit, they are not materials that can be manufactured using modern technology. However, the energy crystal found in the cat species was created artificially. And what's more remarkable is that it was liquid. The guild leaders immediately started a farce. They asked if someone had really created a liquid energy crystal, because it had just been announced that their modern technology was not enough for energy crystals, and now they were talking about liquid. The assistant looked at the Earth Dragon and asked if he knew about this. The man said that of course not, and he knows nothing about energy crystals except the fact that elementals absorb them. After he said this, he thought that this meant that the recent cases of discovering varieties were the result of an experiment to obtain liquid crystal energy, and there was no doubt that someone was conducting these disgusting experiments. One of the meeting participants said that this was, of course, interesting, but there was something else. He looked ahead and asked what this had to do with the MSZS, since before the meeting it had been announced that there was evidence that something pointed to their involvement. The man in glasses said that on the day of the incident in the 4th Monster Zone, several suspicious individuals were spotted on the territory. The man showed the image on the screen and said that they were captured by a drone. And the man everyone is looking at now was identified using facial recognition software. His name is Lim Minsu. He is 33 years old. And everyone is sure that he works as a manager in this company. 4 years ago, he stopped being a researcher in the Faculty of Magical Engineering. However, there is information that he was fired due to some incident. And the papers stated that he stole the energy crystal from a research center and conducted illegal experiments on people. Based on the evidence collected, the Hero Association considers him to be the prime suspect in this incident. And in order to catch him as soon as possible, they asked the guild leaders to assist in the investigation. The next day, Yu Jinho was about to go to the office and was wondering why the guild leader still hadn't responded, since he urgently needed to talk to her. Even though he hadn't received a direct answer from the tamer yet, it was better to talk about hiring her as soon as possible, because even without the information he had received through his ability, having such an experienced hero like her in the guild would be just fine. After thinking about all this, Yu Jinho sighed and said out loud that the only problem was that they didn't have enough funds, and bringing in a person like her would be very expensive. And even though they have the money that Montan made selling all those monster remnants, if they can agree on a fair price, they can pay it with what they have. Yu Jinho got into a taxi, and the taxi driver realized that he now had a hero passenger. He asked which one Yu Jinho belonged to. Yu Jinho said with a smile that he was not because of the big guilds, but was a member of the new guild fun. Yu Jinho thought that the drivers would hardly recognize him. However, the driver immediately said that he had heard about them, and that this was the same guild that dealt with the saber-toothed cats near the Green Sky Apartments. Yu Jinho asked how the driver knew about this, and the taxi driver laughed and said that he lived there. The man also sadly said that, unfortunately, he cannot thank his savior. As they passed one of the turns, the driver looked out the window with displeasure and said that it was real bad luck to see a hybrid so early in the morning. The man told his passenger that the hybrid scared him. Yu Jinho was surprised and asked why, to which the taxi driver replied that, according to rumors, due to their animal nature or something like that, they sometimes become wild. Yu Jinho immediately replied that she looks like an ordinary high school student, and she is wearing an ordinary school uniform. So she must be one of those who are transformed hybrids. But the taxi said that it doesn't matter whether she is a student or not. They are not the same as humans. The taxi driver noticed our hero's gaze and said that perhaps everything is different for heroes. But ordinary people like him will die the moment one of them encounters animals. Eugene remembered the horrors and thought that he could understand why this taxi driver believes something like this. Because people have been attacked and invaded many times, so such beliefs are quite natural. Eugene looked around and thought that despite all this, she was still a child, and judging so harshly was not entirely right. As he continued to think about this, Eugene was certain that his guild leader had been dealing with people all her life who judged her for who she was. While Eugene was thinking about this, he noticed something. Two guys were chasing this girl. Eugene immediately asked the taxi driver to stop and said that he would get out right there. The taxi driver said that they actually weren't even close. However, he stopped and Eugene immediately ran out, the taxi driver shouting that he forgot to pay. Meanwhile, the girl, using her sense of smell, noticed that someone was following her and immediately began to run away. The men shouted loudly that she had figured them out and rushed after her in order to grab her. One of them was in good physical shape and quickly caught up with her, after which he applied a rag soaked in something illegal to her face. After that, they took the girl by the arms and said that they were unlucky to find such a young man, and their clients would be very happy. While they were discussing this loudly out loud, Eugene appeared behind them and asked what they were doing here. The man looked at him, and Eugene grabbed the handle of his blade and said that he would now count to 3. And if they did not let go of her, they would die. The robbers did not move from their place, and Eugene was already preparing to attack when suddenly a huge giant appeared in front of him, who said that it was none of his business and he should not interfere. The guild leader was already in the office after her weekend. Her phone was blowing up with notifications. However, she ignored them. Montaigne asked why she wasn't responding to our hero's message, to which she replied that it was just spam. The girl angrily took the phone and said that she had no reason to ignore him, to which the guy replied with a smile that in his opinion she was still sad about yesterday, and heard that the girl ordered him to shut up. She wondered why he was gone for so long and why he was writing to her. But as soon as she opened the notification from him, she saw that in the last messages he sent her a geolocation, and said that it seems someone is going to kidnap a person, so he calls her here and asks her to grab her gear. Eugene meanwhile looked at the health of the brat and asked if he really works for these bandits. After which, without waiting for an answer, he said that if the big guy steps aside, he will not be charged. But the thug had a different opinion. And as he was already swinging his fist to send our hero to the next world, Eugene instantly realized that this guy was not the kind of guy you could just negotiate with. Eugene dodged the first strike and launched his own, but it had no effect, causing the brute to become even more enraged and prepare to launch a second strike, which Eugene was able to defend against with his blade. Eugene immediately realized that energy was put into his attacks, because otherwise he would not have been able to stop this blade, and this means that there is also a hero in front of him. While Eugene was thinking about this, he noticed that the robbers were already carrying the victim into the car. Eugene realized that if he didn't hurry, he would miss them and the girl would be in danger. After that, Eugene returned from another blow and thought that he tried to minimize the damage since they are in a residential area. However, it turns out that he has no choice and must put him down with one blow. But just as Eugene was thinking about this, an unknown person appeared from above and said that he couldn't allow these idiots to house an entire district. The guy with white hair, and sounded strong energy, and said that our hero was lucky that they were in a hurry, because usually they kill all the witnesses but they don't have time for games. Eugene saw that this guy was also using energy and wondered why there were so many bandit heroes here. After that, a cloud of dust rose up. When it settled, those two were no longer left. Eugene put down his blade, sadly thinking about how he had missed them. After that, he went up at full speed in order to quickly find the car that was carrying the hybrid girl. Eugene used the analysis to figure out where the truck was heading, and as soon as he found out the approximate direction, he set off at full speed. While he was running on the rooftops, the head of the guild called him. Eugene took the phone and said that he would now send her the new location. The girl asked what kind of kidnapping this was, and Eugene replied that he saw a young hybrid girl being kidnapped. Kim was surprised, and Eugene said that he was following them now. So he needed her to call the police, and he would contact her as soon as he found their base. The girl hung up and called the police, thinking that someone of another species had been kidnapped, and there had been a surge in crimes based on interspecies hatred lately. After half an hour of chasing, Yu Jinho finally found the place where the girl was dragged away. He looked at the car and determined that it was exactly the same truck he had seen this morning. After that, he instantly appeared right in front of him and knocked on the window, frightening the driver. The man immediately picked up his phone, wondering how the hell Yu Jinho was able to find them so quickly. However, Yu Jinho broke the glass with his hand and took his phone. Yu Jinho instantly broke it and asked if the driver hadn't heard Yu Jinho knocking on his window. After that, Yu Jinho ripped open the car door and said that they had something to talk about. He grabbed him and put a blade to his throat, saying that he is a hero who saw the crime. This means that he has the power to arrest and decide whether the criminal will live or not. So this is his last chance to explain what is happening here. Meanwhile, a small boss was sitting inside and, seeing a new bribe, asked if this was really the special product they had picked up today. The assistant said that it was. This is a human-cat hybrid, as ordered by my client. The girls removed the tape from her mouth and she immediately screamed that she was asking them to let her go. With tears in her eyes, she said that she would give up every last coin if they let her go. The man came up to her and grabbed the girl by the hair, saying that all her money was pennies compared to how much they offered for her. He looked at her tear-filled face and said that it seemed they had already planned experiments on her, but she shouldn't be too upset because she would be treated specially compared to the other hybrids they had sold. And this is much better than being sent to the slaughter. After that, the man stood up and said that they had 40 minutes left before the clients arrived, so they needed to prepare everything perfectly and try to hide those damn body bags somewhere so that they wouldn't be depressing. The girl said, with tears in her eyes, that their actions were illegal. The man laughed and said that no one cares about hybrids. After all that her kind had done to humanity, this would be considered nothing more than sweet revenge for most. Hearing these words, the girl thought that she really didn't want this. However, she has no choice. She needs to get out, even if she has to go crazy. She tried to do this but noticed that her manhua was blocked. After this, the man hit her head on the ground and explained that she could no longer use her energy. The girl looked him in the face and asked what they did to her. To which he replied that of course they introduced an energy suppressor, and it is very effective on a hybrid because they all know about their small output, so they took all precautions. The boss asked to be careful and not to damage the goods, to which the man replied that hybrids always lose in battle, and if they are not taught discipline, then later they will only cause trouble. The boss said that in his opinion she had already grasped the main point and needed to be taken to the living room. And if she tried to break free again, then simply knock her out. Suddenly, the earth began to shake, after which Yu Jinho burst into the room, saying that he was arresting them under the hero law on charges of illegal alien trafficking and kidnapping. One of the men immediately said that this was the same guy who had been in their way when they were kidnapping the girl. Yu Jinho looked around and saw many hybrids. He immediately realized that these guys were the main culprits, and the situation was even worse than it seemed before. Yu Jinho looked at them and said that he was going to let the police handle this, but he changed his mind, and from now on they were nothing more than monsters that he had to destroy. The boss immediately fell to his knees and began to beg for mercy. After all, they were simply following orders because their bridge was holding them by the head. Yu Jinho looked at him and asked who their bosses were. The man tearfully said back that he couldn't tell his name and begged for mercy. While he was begging for mercy, his fighters pounced on our hero. However, our hero's skill worked, which immediately gave the whole picture. Yu Jinho jumped up and dodged their group attack. While in the air, Yu Jinho realized that they were hiding their presence in order to set up an ambush, and they were clearly not amateurs but professional killers, and perhaps even a hero. Yu Jinho rushed at them and killed 3 of them with one blow, after which he finished off the last one, in front of his boss. The man looked at all this and trembled with fear, thinking that this was impossible. He didn't understand how Yu Jinho was able to defeat all these people, considering that they were no weaker than rank 5 heroes. After that, Yu Jinho approached the girl who was kidnapped and removed the tape from her locked mouth and said that he was here to help her and now she was free and the police were already on their way. He also asked her to tell about what happened today. The girl said that she would definitely tell all of it. After that, she looked at the corpses of the others and asked, "What will happen to them?" Yu Jinho sadly replied that although he was very sorry, none of them survived. A few seconds later, the girl began to tremble, and with tears in her eyes, she loudly asked why they were being treated so cruelly. After all, they didn't ask to be born. "Why is everyone treating them like monsters?" she continued to scream. Yu Jinho wanted to say something to calm him down, but deep down he knew that nothing he could say would change the situation for the better. Meanwhile, the police were already on the street. The captain said that they were currently investigating the area, and they were informed that the hero from the Fun Guild had caught the kidnappers. The head of the guild was standing in the middle of all this, and the police were thinking up a plan. The guy from ZSMS, meanwhile, was at a personal meeting with one important person. He was talking about how he really appreciated that they found time for him. The unknown person laughed and said that he should thank him for agreeing to this meeting. The guy in glasses smiled at me and said that the sample they were given was very useful because they had almost learned to control crystals with energy with 100% accuracy. The stranger poured himself a drink and said that he had already heard about this on the news, and it looked like they had caused quite a stir. When he added that the association was now closely monitoring them, this raised questions about whether they would be able to continue working without problems. The guy in glasses laughed and said that there was no need to worry about that. The unknown person said that despite the fact that his interlocutor says so, he wants to be honest and does not want problems to arise in the future because he has enough bad news for today. Let's talk in glasses. He was surprised and asked, "What are you talking about?" the unknown asked. "Didn't anyone tell him this?" After that, the man sadly stated that it looked like some small pest had started up in the factories, and now the police were looking everywhere. There were many different materials there that could help in the research, but because of this, their deliveries were suspended and he doesn't know if it's just a coincidence or not. But the pest who discovered the warehouse is the same person who defeated the mutant saber-toothed cat. The man also added that he wanted everything to be resolved peacefully and quietly. The guy in glasses drank alcohol and said that he could not even imagine that this would happen. The alcohol was laced with an energy crystal which worked immediately. The guy in glasses said that there was nothing to worry about. His look changed, and he put his hand on his heart and said that they would definitely take care of this guy and the problems he was creating. The police carried out a rescue operation, and it was confirmed that 12 children survived. The rest were not so lucky. Yujinho spoke to the police and gave a statement, until I spotted Kim in the crowd. He approached her, and the first thing the girl asked was if he had dealt with everyone. Yujinho looked at the bodies and said that almost because he couldn't save everyone, because someone had already died before he arrived. The girl looked at the bodies of the victims and asked how things were with the criminals, to which Yujinho replied that he did not kill them, and they were all arrested. The police will investigate this case. While he was saying this, he thought that this was the first time he saw such a chilling expression on her face. Of course, he understands why she says this because she is a hybrid herself. But about Yu Jinho, he is sure that there is someone more than just this warehouse. And leaving these bastards alive is the only option to find out what really happened. Yu Jinho looked at the police and said that he remembered something, although he doubted that they would actually show up here. But there is a possibility because he heard them talking about the client's arrival. So it is imperative to investigate this matter. The police thanked our hero and said that the rest of the work would be theirs, so they could go. But then he came a little closer and said that one of the victims wanted to talk to him. After some time, Yu Jinho was already walking with the hybrid and the half-elf, and the girl changed for asking for such a thing, to which Yu Jinho replied that she could not worry. After all, they also consider this option. The girl asked to be taken home instead of staying with the police. When they finally arrived, Yu Jinho saw that she lived in an orphanage called Blue Sky. Blue Sky is a center for young and vulnerable members of various species who have come to Earth from other worlds. It operates as a regular orphanage that provides the children with basic necessities, such as food and rats over their heads until they reach adulthood. Yu Jinho thought about what he heard, that this was the largest institution of its kind in this country, and even assumed that children who grew up in such places were also targets for kidnapping. When they got close enough, they saw the teacher, who was overjoyed with tears in her eyes that the girl had returned home. Rixis, that was the name of the hybrid, immediately hugged the teacher, and they began to cry. After that, the teacher looked at our hero and apologized for not even noticing him. Yu Jinho replied that everything was fine and she didn't need to worry. The teacher introduced herself and said that she was the director of the orphanage and that the police had called her today and told her everything. After all these words, she came closer to them and bowed deeply, saying that she did not know how to thank them for saving her. And her daughter, the head of the Fun Guild, said that there was no need for gratitude, because this was their duty as heroes. And besides, she did almost nothing, and Yu Jinho did all the work. The headmistress also said that if the rescuers were not busy with anything, then she could invite them for a cup of tea now, and would not keep them locked up for long. Our heroes looked at each other and agreed. When they entered inside, Yu Jinho said that it was somehow too quiet here for an orphanage, to which the director replied that it was quite late now, so the children were already in bed. But after a few minutes, one of the girls screamed that their sister was back and many children ran out into the corridor. The director immediately began to say that it was time for them to go to bed. But the children did not pay attention to her and hugged their so-called. Yoo Jin-ho smiled and said that the children these days never seem to rest as much as they should. The headmistress looked at them and apologized for that. Rixus added that now she would send the children to bed, and for now they could settle in and continue without her. Yoo Jin-ho thought that even after everything she had been through today, she still managed to maintain a courageous expression on her face. They went to the cafeteria with the director, and the director said that she apologized for the children. After all, they are sometimes too energetic. Yoo Jin-ho immediately replied that it does not bother them at all, and it is nice to see that the children stay with them even in such difficult times. The director sadly said that she shouldn't have done that, but when the police contacted her, she was so upset that she accidentally told them that Rixus had been kidnapped and that it seemed they hadn't gone to bed because they were too worried about her. After a short pause, Kim asked if there were any other victims besides this girl. The director looked down and said that besides her, this was the only incident, and it looks like the other children were from similar neighboring institutions. Kim stopped and asked about the food. Was there really another similar incident? But in the middle of this question, another girl entered the room and said that she brought tea. The director called the girl by the name of Layla and thanked her for not sleeping yet and helping them. Layla immediately replied that everything was fine, and it was her responsibility to take care of everyone when they came to visit. After that, she looked at the headmistress and asked if these were the same people she had talked about earlier. The headmistress said that this was true, and the girl bowed deeply, thanking them for saving her friend. The director said that Layla had also once experienced something similar. 5 years ago, 2 children from this orphanage were kidnapped. Layla returned alive, but the other child was less fortunate. Yoo Jin-ho said that he was very sorry about it, but Kim flared up and immediately asked, if there's something else locked up, how could they help? She also added that she wanted to donate a decent amount of money. However, the director turned away with a smile and said that it was very nice of her. However, this was not necessary. She added sadly that other groups had offered to help them in the past and they had all made the same promises. They talked about providing financial support, permanent support, and they talked about Korea becoming a place where different species could live in harmony. But in reality, no one cared about them when they really needed help. The director looked at the girl and said that when Layla was kidnapped, only one large guild helped them. Yoo Jin-ho asked which guild, and the director replied that it was the Dice Guild, and they would never have been able to find it without their help. The director continued to say that at the time, there was a lot of backlash from their supporters, which caused quite a bit of tension, and quite a few benefactors from other races held a grudge against the heroes. Yoo Jin-ho listened to all this and thought that this was a real dilemma, because even though it was just about helping those in need, there was still a significant conflict of interest. The director continued to say that given their current situation, they are not yet able to independently determine what is best for their home. So although she appreciates their offer, she is afraid that they cannot accept any more help now. Kim immediately stood up, fixed her hair, and said that if this was the only concern, then there was no need to worry. After that, she showed her elven ears and said that she was not fully human either. The director looked at her in surprise and said that she thought that Kim was the head of the guild. Kim sat back down and said that her guild was created by her, and there was nothing wrong with that. As she grew up, she began to face a huge amount of discrimination just because of her essence. And during the period of their life, there was a moment when she distanced herself from the world and looked at everything through the prism of bitterness. She was afraid of those who despised her for who she was. After that, she looked at our hero and said with a smile that she then realized that there are people who choose understanding over prejudice, and she believes that they are the ones who can really change the situation for the better. Listening to all this, the director could not believe her words. She thought that perhaps in this world, there was still a breeze that was trying to destroy the seemingly indestructible barrier of species differences. For a moment, she felt a breeze rush past her eyes, and this breeze blew through the open door, not all of it a new wave of hope for someone. When they were finally alone, the first thing Kim did was apologize. Yoo Jin-ho said that there was no need to apologize. And then he said that she should also understand perfectly well that monthly donations would hit the budget and the guild hard. The girl with tears in her eyes said that she understood this perfectly well and asked not to raise this topic again. Yoo Jin-ho smiled and said that he was surprised, because she really took responsibility and sounded like a real guild leader, and we heroes were impressed in the end. And until now, as long as she doesn't do something dangerous, he will support any decision she makes. Kim straightened up and asked why if Yoo Jin-ho thought so highly of her. He decided to secretly date Min Yuri, Yu Jinho immediately replied that he had a reason. While they were discussing this, Rixus ran up to them. Yu Jinho immediately asked why she wasn't sleeping yet, and she replied that there was something she couldn't tell them before. The girl thanked them again for saving her today, and added that she was so shocked that she couldn't even properly thank them. The girl, with a smile and tears in her eyes, said that thanks to our hero and Kim, she had the strength to move on, and she is incredibly grateful for this, so she wants to give something as a token of gratitude. The girl stretched out her hands and the atmosphere around changed. A huge crystal appeared in front of them. Yu Jinho took it in his hand, and the girl said that it was an artifact from her world, which she calls home. Yu Jinho and the guild leader were incredibly surprised because there was a huge energy crystal in front of them. The next morning, Yu Jinho and Kim gathered to discuss Min Yuri's transfer to the Fun Guild. Yu Jinho tried to convince the elf by saying that they were now a fourth-rank guild, and it was the perfect time to attract new talents. With these words, the elf realized that they had not been on a date that day, and that she had simply been mistaken all this time. After finishing talking about this, she looked at our hero with a cold gaze and asked if he seriously thought that they could actually hire someone like this girl. Yu Jinho said that they wouldn't know until they tried, and it would be worth the effort. After which he finished her off with words about how the guild was too small and the chance of finding a hero like her didn't happen every day. After getting over her feelings, Kim gave her permission. However, she said that in the future, Yu Jinho should consult with her before acting so thoughtlessly. Having finished with the details, Kim loudly cleared her throat, saying that the conversation was over, and it's time to move on to discussing the crystal they recently received. Yu Jinho looked at it and said that it seemed to have much more energy than the other crystals they had found. After saying these words, Yu Jinho placed it on the table and said that at first he thought that this could be a good opportunity to feed it to his spirit, but he had an idea about training with this crystal. Yu Jinho summoned Sylph and started chatting with her like an old friend. Kim was surprised that Yu Jinho could already communicate with his spirit. As soon as Sylph saw the crystal, she immediately tried to absorb it, but the hero stopped her. After that, he grabbed the spirit and said that if the spirit continues to behave like a spoiled child, it will not receive this crystal of energy. Yu Jinho then gave a few simple instructions, and the spirit obediently followed them. Looking at this, Kim thought about how, when the spirit was with her mother, she treated him like a lifelong companion, a close friend. But Yu Jinho treats him like you treat a pet. With tears in her eyes, she thought that the spirit itself had chosen such a master for itself. After finishing the exercises, Yu Jinho said that since the spirit was now following his instructions well, he could receive this energy crystal as a reward. Hearing these words, the spirit instantly collected all the energy from the crystal. Yu Jinho was surprised because this time the reaction was much stronger than he expected. Suddenly, everything around changed. When Yu Jinho opened his eyes, he was in a strange space. Yu Jinho became worried, but a voice rang out in his head. The voice said that there was no need to worry because Yu Jinho was now inside the virtual space that the spirit created. Looking up, Yu Jinho saw a huge crystal ball in front of him. A voice in his head said that he was very glad to meet his master after all. They could finally talk properly. When Yu Jinho came to his senses, he said that he did not know that his spirit could talk. The spirit noticeably perked up and thanked his master for the energy crystal, explaining that with the help of its power, he was able to temporarily create this space so that they could talk normally. But most likely it won't be possible to hold it for too long. Therefore, it is necessary to discuss everything as quickly as possible. While the spirit was saying this, Yu Jinho noticed that the sphere was beginning to disintegrate. Noticing this, Yu Jinho said that if the spirit continued to maintain such a large space, it might put them at risk. However, the spirit did not pay attention to these words and briefly said that they were now being pursued. And just as Yu Jinho is gaining more and more power from the spirit, these pursuers are also not standing still and are becoming stronger using these crystals. You need to watch the people around you carefully, because sometimes those you trust the most are hiding the most terrible secrets. Yu Jinho immediately asked, "Is the spirit really saying that there is a traitor among their acquaintances?" The spirit replied that he couldn't be sure of this and that he would have to figure it all out on his own. The sphere cracked more and more until you convinced him that Yu Jinho also had to protect Kim Siha at any cost, because this was the wish of the previous owner and the reason why Yu Jinho was chosen as her successor. Yu Jinho looked at Sphere in surprise and asked how he was supposed to understand this if the burden of responsibility was just dumped on him like that. After these words, the sphere exploded, disintegrating into small pieces. while the spirit said that Yu Jinho would definitely understand everything, because there is a time for everything, and they will meet when the moment comes. After Yu Jinho blinked once more, he found himself in a familiar room. Looking back, Yu Jinho saw that he was lying on the floor, and the elf was saying that she thought that something went wrong because Yu Jinho had not woken up for a long time. After that, Yu Jinho looked down and said that he had just communicated with his spirit. He wanted to tell what they were talking about, when suddenly a spirit appeared in the room, which finally acquired its physical form. Yu Jinho looked at the sylph without hiding his surprise. Let's move on to the Korean division of MSZS. Director Minsu said that he heard that the kidnapping of the last hybrid had not gone according to plan, and because of this they had lost a large delivery base, and the faith of their business partner had begun to weaken. With these words, he poured the liquid crystal on the rat, which immediately transformed, after which he asked who he should hold responsible for this mess. The guy with white hair said that he understood how it might sound. However, their task was to thoroughly scout the area, and they did not destroy the hero who appeared because they were afraid of exposing themselves. Director Minsu looked at the guy and asked if this was his excuse for not being able to calmly deal with one single hero, after which the man reminded him that he had not created his servants for that. After a short pause, Director Minsu said that he was not going to repeat it again, and if they did not bring Jihan's head from Fun, then they could say goodbye to life. Immediately after these words, another man burst into the laboratory and declared that they had problems. A group of heroes burst into the office, and they just started grabbing everything from the office, with words about the fact that these are direct instructions from the association. A few hours ago, the Earth Dragon gave the order to arrest Director Minsua of the Korean branch of MSZS and all of his subordinates. The Earth Dragon also said that the association had not given its consent to this, and if they acted without its approval, they would clearly have problems. However, they would have to take a risk because, despite the fact that the association ordered the cartridges to transmit all information, if they acted strictly according to protocol, they would never catch these criminals. Having finished explaining, the man put his hands in his pocket and said that there was another problem. A rat had started up in the association. Some of the heroes are collaborating with these scoundrels, and there must be some connection between the recent cases where heroes were drawn into dubious incidents. Because given the hype that has arisen, there is no reason to unite with other guilds, and you need to be extremely careful. After all, these guys from the office can launch something much worse than you might expect. While arresting everyone in the office, Khan thought that he had been warned about illegal actions. However, none of the people in the office pose a threat. Upakovan was discussing this when a subordinate approached him and said that during the inspection, most of the workers turned out to be ordinary civilians, and there was also no information about where Director Minsu was. One of the workers turned pale and then began muttering about how everyone here would die after they came here. Kan tried to get him to talk, but this guy was clearly already out of his mind, and he kept confirming that when the Blessed Ones arrived, everyone would see how blind and selfish they were. Even though it sounded like the ravings of a madman, it did clarify some things. One of the participants in this operation said that in front of them there was simply a fanatic who carried feelings, and they needed to move on and not pay attention to him. However, their mage tensed up, saying that someone was heading here, weaving, and the energy he felt was just like that of monsters. These were the same two guinea pigs Director Minsua. The guy with white hair laughed and said that he was just looking for someone he could vent his anger on. Kang slowly stood up and asked the two if they knew where Director Minsu was now. However, instead of answering, one of those thugs pounced on him. The swordswoman immediately took out her blade to repel this attack with her technique. However, it was not aimed at them, but at the workers. Everyone had thoughts in their heads that there was clearly something wrong with this guy. While the blonde was killing the ordinary workers, the thug attacked the heroes. But the magician used his powers to slow down his movements. And then another fighter appeared and hit the big guy face down on the floor. When the guy with gray hair saw this, he was surprised when he could not believe that one of the experienced rollers was destroyed so quickly. But his reasoning was interrupted by Khan. He had to go against the blonde man against the wall. The blonde couldn't understand what was happening and why ordinary heroes were much stronger than those who had gone through training and had their bodies changed. Lesha on the floor. He thought that the reports were completely wrong, and these guys were much stronger than they were told. After all this, the chief looked at his workers and said that they needed to finish this quickly because he needed the latest news about the wounded, and these two needed to be detained. While he was telling this, he heard laughter behind him. The blonde man with a smile said that Khan had just let his guard down. The guy took the ampule with liquid crystal and said that the heroes were lucky because they were the first to see the second blessing. Our heroes, meanwhile, went to the building of the Dice Guild. The vice president met them and asked what brought the young people here. Kim immediately replied that she came here to see the Earth Dragon. However, the vice president said that he was not here now. Yu Jinho said that it was very bad because he wanted to talk to him about spirits and asked to tell him that they came here. The vice president said that she would of course pass all this on to him as soon as he returned. However, while they were talking about this, a worker ran up to the vice president and said that they had just lost contact with Khan's team, and the last time they had received news from them was when they were still in the MSS building. The vice president asked him to keep quiet because they couldn't talk about this in front of others. But inside she was clearly worried. The girl didn't understand what was happening and why all this happened when the Earth Dragon was not there. Yu Jinho also became interested when he heard about this news and asked to explain what connects MSZ and heroes. Due to unforeseen circumstances, our heroes were also taken on this operation. Along the way, the vice president told them that what she was about to tell them was top secret information. Not long ago, the Hero Association ordered all guilds to conduct a joint investigation into the activities of the MSZS. The main person they are hunting is their director Minsu Iminsu. He is suspected of being behind the recent incidents of creating monster varieties. And the information had already been passed on to all the major guilds including the Six. The clan consisted of all sorts of people conducting a collective investigation within a few days. Kim was surprised and said that if it was something serious enough for every guild to take part in it, then why was the Dice Guild acting on its own? The vice president explained that the Earth Dragon didn't trust other guilds. These joint operations usually created a lot of unnecessary friction, and this time they decided to take matters into their own hands and start their own investigation, so they sent a team to the MSZS office. Kim rubbed her chin and said that everything just fell into place. The Dice had lost contact with their team, and they couldn't send reinforcements without being exposed. All this, Yu Jinho said that the girl cannot worry. And the guild fund will help with this, because even though they are still considered a new guild, this gives some advantages, because no one will definitely suspect them, and since there are only two of them, it will be much easier to get through. And besides, this is a great opportunity to try out new powers of your spirit. With these words, Yu Jinho stood up and opened the helicopter's cockpit. And then he jumped down from a bird's-eye view. Meanwhile, Khan came to his senses, looked around, and wondered where he was and if everything was okay. There were bodies of dead comrades all around, and the Khan's right hand was missing. Gritting his teeth, he growled loudly that it was his fault and he shouldn't have let his guard down. While the man was thinking about this, the test subject entered the room again and said that it was time to continue their duel. Through analysis, the hero realized that their bodies had merged with the monsters. This means that the organization is actually conducting such experiments. Thoughts were spinning in his head that he had to tell the boss about this no matter what. But his reasoning was interrupted. Their team's tank, with tears in his eyes, said that he was apologizing because he had to protect them all. After checking his face, the tank realized that he had no eyes. He said that he definitely won't get out of here. So the squad captain should abandon his team and run from here, while maybe and tank will hold off these of yours as much as possible. However, these were his last words, because one of the thugs had just crushed the guy's skull with one blow, and with the next blow he sent Khan to the wall. The blonde said that this guy shouldn't be killed if they can use him to get information about the hero's plans. And just as he said that, a familiar voice came from behind him. It was Yu Jinho. Kim immediately radioed that help was needed, as well as medical assistance immediately. Yu Jinho asked the elf to step back, because he didn't want her to get hurt if something went wrong. After this, the guy summoned his spirit. After releasing it, Yu Jinho took out his blade, feeling a huge amount of energy flowing through his body and penetrating the blade. Elemental control is a magic that allows you to use the forces of nature by concluding a contract with the spirit of the elements. Of course, regular elemental magic also uses the power of nature, but on the other side of the city, Montan was heading to the guild office after several business meetings. He heard a conversation between two passers-by who were loudly discussing yesterday's video that blew up the internet. Jihan's name was also in the news, and passers-by were surprised that he was also on video next to the first-rank heroes. Montan thought that this was a great plan and approached them, apologizing for interrupting their conversation. The guys wanted to answer something. However, the guy quickly added that Jihan would not give autographs without his permission. After the Soul Monster attack, footage of Yu Jihan alongside the first-rank heroes spread like wildfire. There was a hype around the appearance of a new hero, Everyone was waiting for his further exploits, and this was only the beginning. Seeing how far Jihan and Sihu had advanced, Montan did not even doubt that the Guild of Fun would achieve incredible success. And until that day comes, Montan is going to be their representative, to be there to support them on this difficult path. With these thoughts, Montan finally reached the office and greeted everyone with a smile. However, he stopped immediately. After all, I noticed that Min was in the room now. Yu Jihan peacefully talks to her about how she could have just called, since she didn't have to come here. Min said that when she saw our hero on the news, she was finally able to make a decision, and she agrees to our hero's proposal. Montan eavesdropped on this whole conversation. Thoughts were spinning in his head that there is no doubt that Yu Jihan and Min are now a couple. Looking at all these strange formulations, he became convinced that she was here to confess her love. Montaigne even had tears in his eyes from such romanticism. Yu Jihan felt a great sense of relief, because if she joined them, she would clearly be of great use in the fight against the Azizians. Who was he thinking about this? The door suddenly opened and Montan appeared on the threshold, trying to pull the hamster away from his face, saying that he could use a little help. Min immediately ordered her animal to let this guy go. Yu Jihan didn't understand how this huge beast suddenly became a small beast. After finishing the formalities, Yu Jihan called Sihu and told him the news that they had a new addition to the guild. Sihu said with a smile that it was great news if she would be a great addition to their team. She also added that she would arrive soon and they would discuss the terms of her contracts. Sihu's father asked if the tamer he had met before had really joined the guild. Sihu replied that it was. After that, she asked, "Do you really remember her father?" To which the man replied that of course he remembers her, because she is quite famous in Japan because she is the first person who tamed the chinchilla. The father looked at his daughter and said that if such a hero joins her guild, it means that the guild is gradually starting to gain momentum. The girl fixed her hair and said that her guild is not that popular yet. However, she still thanks for such warm words. The old man pressed the gas pedal and said that he also wanted to go and greet Jihan. Half an hour later, they finally arrived. The man immediately greeted Min, and they introduced themselves to each other. During the handshake, the man noticed that she was undoubtedly a very experienced hero. Judging by the calluses on her hands, she was not only a tamer but also a fairly experienced archer. Yu Jihan noticed this and thought that he understood why the man was so careful, since she could become a target for aliens. So his checking the new guild member made sense. After this, the old man looked at the little chinchilla and they explained to him that it was now in its miniature form. Intrigued by this, he was surprised to learn that she could change her size at will. The old man slowly extended his hand and said that if no one objected, he wanted to take a sample of wool, because it could be a valuable addition to his research. However, as soon as he extended his hand, the chinchilla hissed loudly. Min became wary while the old man was unpleasantly surprised by such behavior. To smooth things over, Min said that her pet is not the most sociable when it comes to strangers, and if the doctor needs a sample, it will be provided later. Sihu began to push Dad out of the office, saying that she was very embarrassed. And Min, with the chinchilla in her arms, looked closely at this man. After all, there is only one reason why her little animal is so wary of people. Great Britain, London, an ordinary building, at first glance. However, in the basement is the London branch of MSZS. Today, all the representatives gathered here, and in the middle stood an unknown man. The man, with his back turned, said loudly that he was glad that everyone was here today. This was Isaac Becker, president of the International Society of Zoological Society. Calling one of his Prot GS, the president continued to talk about how their plans for the Korean branch had failed, so someone needed to go there and make sure everything was going according to the original instructions. And Ruiz is perfect for this purpose. In another part of the planet, in a similar basement, Minsu, who had lost to Beck, was basking in a recovery capsule. His body was restored and finally, having regained consciousness, he immediately broke through the capsule. His body returned to its previous form, but his consciousness was still clouded. Jerry walked up to him carefully, greeting him with a smile. But the smile immediately disappeared. Her cheeks puffed out, and Jerry said in an offended tone that she had missed her for 3 whole days. Ruiz ignored this childish chatter, and after a few seconds of silence, said that if he woke up here, it meant that the plan had failed. Jerry immediately replied that he was right, and the previous Minsu was dead. Surprised, he asked why he was resurrected in that case. Jerry wanted to answer something, but suddenly the atmosphere in this place became very tense. Ruiz was walking slowly here. Entering inside, Ruiz said that it was his order because it would be a shame to lose such a fighter. Upon seeing Ruiz, Jerry immediately rushed at him, screaming that she missed him incredibly. However, Ruiz avoided these unwanted embraces, after which he calmly replied that they actually saw each other yesterday. Minsu fell to his knees and bowed his head, expressing regret that their plan had failed. Ruiz took a few steps towards him, interrupting his speech with words about how, in the end, it was quite difficult to deal with first-rank heroes. Coming close, he also said that the spirit of the wind had found its new master. And he knows that the guy's name is Yu Jihan, so he wants to hear more details about him. Meanwhile, in the Fun Guild office, the old man had already said goodbye to everyone and prepared to go back to Japan. The man also added that now that his daughter has a reliable guild member next to her, he can be calm. Sihu asked to stay for at least a few seconds in order to see Sylph. However, Yu Jihan immediately replied that he tried to summon her the day before yesterday, but for some reason she did not appear. Yu Jihan thought about it. It was very strange, and the wind spirit had never seen himself like this before. The old man got into a taxi and replied that the wind spirit was probably just tired, and it was okay if he didn't see him, because it was time for him to leave. Finally, the old man looked at our hero and said that someday he would have to face what they were talking about. After that, he got into the car saying that Yu Jihan had to protect Sylph. Finding himself in the back seat, the man thought that it doesn't matter how hard they try to avoid it, because fate is still everything that goes together. After all, the bones of fate have long since passed. Sihu looked at our hero and asked what they had talked about with her father. Yu Jihan replied that it was just a normal man-to-man conversation. And then Zihu said that it all sounded very suspicious. Yu Jihan looked at her, thinking that he should keep the events of 10 years ago a secret from the Sihu. So he immediately turned around and replied that there was nothing interesting there, suggesting that they finish for today. However, she stopped him and asked him to go to the bank if he didn't have any plans. After going back and forth, Yu Jihan was pleasantly surprised, because in his hands was a golden card that he could not even dream of. This is a corporate VIP card issued by the government for the needs of the guild. The government partially pays for the needs of the guild. It's incredibly difficult to get one of these. Holding his blade in his hands, Yu Jihan thought that it was probably worth taking it. But on the other hand, you never know when and where enemies might appear, like during the invasion of Seoul. And even though everything seems peaceful, it feels like all this showdown was just a dream. And these are literally two different worlds, because the gap between the world of people and the world of heroes is simply huge. While Yu Jihan was thinking about this, he accidentally bumped into one of the passers-by. Yu Jihan immediately apologized, and I noticed that this guy had animal ears. I was surprised. Usually such guys don't walk around among people, but I pushed these thoughts aside. Despite this, there was a strange feeling inside. Yu Jihan finally understood what this feeling was. This is what he felt from Jerry. Yu Jihan immediately turned around, but the beast-like creature had already disappeared. Not far from this place, one beastman ate some fruits, and when the saleswoman asked him to pay, he replied that he actually had no money. Yu Jihan looked at this and wondered if he should step in and help. But unexpectedly, the analysis skill worked. Only a moment passed, but it was enough for the beast-like creature to bite off the saleswoman's head. The rest of the people began to run away, and Yu Jihan took out his blade. Through analysis, Yu Jihan determined the probability of defeating this opponent. The numbers were quite acceptable, 76%.